1, Chapter 20, Section 20, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This meeting is being convened by video conference via the Zoom app as posted on the meeting agenda. See the meeting agenda on the town website for details on how to participate remotely. This meeting will feature some public comment. Please note that this meeting may be recorded and may be published or rebroadcast. All participation within this meeting will be visible to others. Finally, each vote taken during this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Okay, first thing as usual is residents' concerns. Justin, would you call on the people with their hands raised, please?
Yes, I think I just promoted him a Jess, so she should be okay. We have Charlie Cadlick.
Am I on?
You are on. Please go ahead.
I want to talk a little bit about ALG and the budget process. As you know, the last ALG meeting seemed to have taken care of the fiscal 23 budget issues, and I'm sure everybody was pleased and decided it was done. Well, it's not. The world has changed in the last few days in ways that will affect all of us, including you as a board. And I think it may be a good idea to give this some extended thought, because it's pretty clear that, well, several things will happen. One of them already has, which is the cost of fuel going up exponentially. By the time this fiscal 23 starts, we don't know where we'll be, but we still need to buy it. Second, Mr. Putin is known to be vindictive. In his early days, he was known to be ruthless, cold, but reasonably rational. Since then, credible people such as Condoleezza Rice have observed that he has changed. He seems to be less rational, and he will probably do something to contradict the sanctions that have been imposed on him, one of which may be to interrupt electrical grid, fuel sources, and all this. And we may find ourselves unable to purchase fuel or use electricity for extended periods of time.
1 minute left.
Which lends to the question, how long can we go without sources of fuel to run the ambulance, the fire engines, police cruisers, backup generators, help people who are on oxygen, on dialysis? There's a long list of things that if we go a couple of weeks will be a big problem for you, the board. So I'm bringing this up to suggest that we may want to spend some time analyzing this and making some plans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Madeline Cruz.
Good evening, everybody. This is Madeline Cruz from 2 Townhouse Lane. I'm calling in tonight to ask how the town can help those of us renters that live in apartment units or just renting from somewhere, and we've never been told about PFAS in our water system. Like when I was pregnant and I had my baby, and all of a sudden more and more people are talking about it, and I was made aware of it through another person that lives here at Yankee Village, and my landlord told me through an email in January, but she should have told me way before that. So I want to know how the town can help people like me possibly get filters that do remove or lower PFAS, because I am very concerned, especially with my son's health, and I would love to know if you guys are willing to do something for people like I that don't have the accessibility of getting clean water so I could cook and drink with. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Franny Osmond.
Hi. I appreciate hearing all of the concerns of other people. So I want to thank them for bringing up important points. I just wanted to get on because I didn't know if anybody else here would be talking about it. The fact that the town is hosting a forum on transportation. Recently, we had one where we heard residents' ideas and experiences about our transportation program. And there's one specifically for business owners and customers and employees. And it's tomorrow, 6 p.m. and Wednesday, 10 a.m. 2 separate times for convenience. And if people are interested in attending, it's just a place to air questions and comments. They should contact our Director of Economic Development, Julie Pierce-Onos, at her address, which is J. Pierce-Onos, Pierceonos, at actonma.gov. I just wanted to share that. Sorry to use this as, I never know how our culture is always changing, and the citizens' concerns moment has changed along with everything else. And I actually really like having this opportunity for people to speak about what's important to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Tom Gillespie.
Good evening. My question was whether agenda item 6 would have a chance for public comments at that point, or whether you would want them now.
Go ahead now, Tom, if you'd like to.
Okay, sure. So I've gotten to know Franny I've gotten to know Tony Norton through dog park activities. And when I saw this item, I don't know a lot of the details, frankly, but I felt like I wanted to express some support ahead of time. The Norton family has been, quite a contributor to the town over the years, especially through the recreation department, et cetera. And I know that precedents are important things, et cetera, but given the location and perhaps some of the unique circumstances associated with that, I just wanted to weigh in on public comments and hoping that the town can, assist some folks that really have made a big impact and a big difference on Acton. Thoreau Road in Acton. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's Pory Road, but.
Well, no, but I forgot to say that I live on Thoreau.
Oh, sorry. I understand.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Sorry.
Ready for the next one?
Yes, please.
Next one is Colin User.
This doesn't say anything about
Hi there, can you hear me?
or a dining room.
Yeah, I know. It was
And
really, really hard to tell.
Yeah, I'm going again. The position.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hi, it's Sarah from West Acton. I don't know if you're going to let people speak on ban the bag and the energy mix, but I'm in favor of those. I'm concerned about any utility infrastructure that would be extending gas. And then in-person meetings, I feel like I love in-person meetings, but I also love the Zoom idea because people join in, and it's a great way to keep people involved. So I hope you include a Zoom option forever. The request for more resources for renters, I'm so glad that you put the information on the website, and I hope that you do more for renters. And then I also will express concern about what Charlie said. I wasn't concerned until he said it, so now I'm concerned. And then lastly, I'd like to know what's going on. I also support the Ace of Parliament becoming high priority. I would like to know what the progress is on the select board goal to look at the feasibility of a rehab trust. I see staff from planning going and talking about new building options, accessory buildings and new zoning and stuff like that. And I'm hoping that they're also spending time on the Acton Rehab Trust idea. So there you have it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up is Kirsten Spargo.
Hello, this is Kirsten Spargo from Yankee Village. I was just wanting clarification on agenda item 9, the update on resources for renters. Will we have a residents' comment section there?
Actually, probably not, because there's no decision to be made there. It's an update from the town manager on the steps that have already been taken.
Okay, well, I guess I'm going to have a little speak now then. We are obviously grateful as part of the Housing and Climate Justice for Acton group. We're grateful for the webpage that's been created and the telephone number. But we are looking for some clarity and updates on the process of tracking calls from the renters requesting the assistance. We're also interested in understanding how the town plans to publicize these resources other than the website, maybe undertaking the mailing. And we were also interested in understanding the new staff working group on renter issues, just how that will work, and just talk through that for us. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you. We'll see if we can ask the town manager those things on that agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have Dana Snyder Grant, and it looks like their Zoom's not updated, so permission to promote them to panelists.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. You're muted,
Dana, you're
Dana.
muted. There you go.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, thank you. I'm also wanting to talk about the renter study. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is that it would be good if there's a study about the question of renters' needs, that it doesn't have to be a long study, it doesn't have to be months at a time, but maybe a 3-month study. So not to extend it so long that it becomes unwieldy. So that was one point I wanted to make about the study of renters. The other thing is that there's been pointed out that there are lots of resources for renters, but in my experience, I've been working as a homeowner, just listening and being in the group and trying to understand the problems for renters, because it concerns me a lot. And I hear that people say that a lot of the resources that have been offered for them to use to get support have not been responsive, nor have landlords been responsive. So that's why the study is so important. And I thank you for taking this up. We thank you lots for really tackling the issue.
Thank you.
And we have Bob Van Meter.
Hi. Am I gonna get a picture too, or?
Not unless you turn on your camera, but no, just
No.
just go ahead and
All right, I'll just go ahead. I wanted to thank the select board for continuing to focus on the issue of resources for renters. And I want to suggest that the select board consider adding some tenant representatives to this internal working group, making it more of a staff and volunteer committee, because I think it would be very helpful to get renter perspectives as the town staff work on these issues. And I want to agree with Dana that whatever process the town goes through should be undertaken on a fairly short timeline, like 90 days. I don't think this issue will require a full year of study or something like that. I think a fairly short period of time would be appropriate. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, seeing no more hands, we'll move forward. I do have a few things to talk about this morning from the chair. Things are looking up for us as we move out of the pandemic, but as Charlie Cadillac was talking about, I want to just take a moment to acknowledge the serious situation with Putin's war on Ukraine, and the bravery of the Ukrainian people defending their democracy, and the suffering of the people in that area. So I think, as things are looking good for us, I just want to contrast that with, it's not good for everybody. I also want to note a few upcoming events. At our next meeting, which will be 1 week from today, we're going to have a forum so that people can comment on whether we should raise the CPA surcharge or not. Actually, raising the CPA surcharge is a ballot vote, but whether we should put it on the ballot. The CPA surcharge pays for affordable housing, historic preservation, open space, and recreation projects. So please attend next week to share your thoughts. In roughly a month, on the last Tuesday in March, that's the town elections. There's one contested race, so please vote or vote via mail. And normally our annual town meeting would be the following week, but in this year we postponed it to May 16th. So town meeting will not be in April, it'll be in the middle of May. I also wanted to say that some people may remember that the board voted to transfer Red Raven's liquor license to Frolic and Detour a couple of months ago. Well, on Saturday, they officially changed their name to the new name, Frolic and Detour. My spouse and I had a great time there on Saturday for dinner with a couple of friends. I encourage everyone to check it out. It's been a good and busy months for businesses in Acton. The Asian market opened on Great Road. Even Murray's Cheese Shop opened in West Acton. So been a busy February. And that's all I have. Mr. Manager, your update, please.
Thank you. Good evening. Just a few items in terms of where we are with COVID case tracking. We're currently at 11 in the community, which is much better than we were a few weeks ago, 6 weeks ago in particular. And as you saw, the Board of Health voted last week to remove the order that had been in place for about a month or two. The other issues related to COVID were following state guidance, and that's all been made available through several means. The open space and recreation plan is in the process of being updated. We're doing some community engagement as part of that process through a community survey, which you should be getting a postcard for that in the mail within the next week or so. And we'd ask you to try to fill that survey out by the end of March. And if there's any questions about that, let us know. The climate action planning process is proceeding on to phase 2. There'll be a meeting on Wednesday. If you're interested in participating in that, contact sustainability@actonma.gov. As mentioned by Franny Osmond earlier, there's a transportation forum 2 this week. One is tomorrow at 6, and the next one is at Wednesday at 10. The idea is we could try to catch people at different times and get as many people as possible. So hopefully you can attend one of those. There's also a public forum to discuss the proposed archaeology bylaw by the Acton Historical Commission. That's going to be March 23rd at 7 p.m. Put that on your calendar. For board and committee members that may be watching, there's Town Council's office is going to run another open meeting law training on March 9th. So contact my office if you are interested in attending that. That's going to be in person. There's going to be a sewer commissioners workshop on March 17th, midday. It's almost like a training workshop and overview of the whole sewer system for sewer commissioners, so that we have an understanding of everything that's going on and that has gone on in the last 15 to 20 years. As mentioned, the town election is coming up March 29th. The last day to register the vote is March 9th. Go to actonma.gov/election for more information. And the town meeting is May 16th. The warrant closes for citizen petitions on March 23rd. If there's any questions about that, let us know. I wanted to thank the Public Works folks, the team. They had a couple big storms in February. Hopefully that's the end of it, but they did a nice job clearing the miles and miles of streets and the miles and miles and miles of sidewalks. So nice work to those folks. And I wanted to mention that there's a transition going on at the Acton Memorial Library, and we're in the process now of recruiting a new library director, and we're very fortunate to have an interim library director who I'd like to introduce to the board tonight, just so you can have a face to the name. Jennifer Harris is serving as our interim library director for a few months. She's formerly the library director for the town of Plymouth and also served as an interim in another community. So she's got a lot of experience. Jennifer, are you here?
I am.
There you are.
See my picture.
Yes.
Thank you, John, for the introduction. I just wanted to meet the board, and because I want to stay on top of you're moving towards your town meeting. I always attended all the town meetings when I was the library director in Plymouth. And for curiosity's sake, I am a town meeting member in Plymouth, so I'm even more involved as I retired from the main branch. But this has really been an honor working already. I have fallen in love with the library, and I'm having a great time. And John's been a dream to work with, and Mary Ann Fleckner. So thank you.
Thank you and welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. We're in good hands with Jennifer. So thank you. And those are my updates.
Thank you. Does any member have a member minute?
Sure.
I saw Himmage's hand first. So
Good.
then Jim.
Sounds good. I just want to echo what you said, David, about Ukraine. It's a very heartbreaking and in many ways unjust situation. So thank you for making that remark. Just wanted to underscore what the town manager said. The Board of Health voted at the last Board of Health meeting last Wednesday to repeal the mask mandate that they had put into place few months ago. What is time? But just wanted to note that, currently, if you do want to stay masked, you can, and businesses can still have mask mandates and mask policies. So just wanted to put that out there as people are starting to get adjusted to more in-person things, because luckily we have seen cases go down. So just wanted to make that note of hope, but also of caution if people want to continue masking, to feel free to continue to do so. And I will pass it off to Jim now.
Go ahead, Jim.
Thanks, Imogen. I think I don't actually have announcements from my committees that I'm liaison to, but as the clerk, I will note that there are 44 attendees at this meeting. So I think we have some agenda items of great interest to people. So it's great to see all the participation.
Dean.
Yeah, just from the point of view of the Community Preservation Committee, we're hard at work trying to prioritize the projects. As you know, there's a big disconnect this year between the dollar value of the requests and the dollars we actually have to parcel out. So the committee will be hard at work for the next couple of weeks, trying to come up with a priority list we can bring to town meeting. So that's really a tremendous focus on our part. I will be presenting an update to the Finance Committee in a couple of weeks about where we stand on that process. That's it.
Great. Anything from you, Fran? Okay, we'll move on to our first agenda item, which is a public hearing, and I will read the notice. Under MGL 140, Section 58, the Acton Select Board will hold a public hearing on February 28th at 7:35 p.m. remotely by video conference and call in for a Class 2 auto dealer's license for Advanced Auto Sciences, Inc., located at 140 Great Road, Acton. Login instructions for computers can be found here. From a computer, please click on this link to join the public meeting, actonma.gov/meeting/BOS, or from a telephone dial 646-876-9923 and enter webinar ID 503-918-785. Telephone users may dial *9 to request to speak after joining the meeting. Computer and app users may use the raise hand feature to speak. Okay. John, is there someone here from Advanced Auto Sciences, Inc.?
Yes, I believe so. Is that Joy? Joy is allowed to speak, or I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes. Please tell us who you are. I think you're.
I'm sorry. My name is Dave Hackett, and I'm on my wife's computer, and her name's Joy.
Okay,
Sorry
great.
about that.
Yeah, not a problem. And you're with Advanced Auto Sciences, Inc.?
Yep, that's right. That's my business.
And can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing on the site?
Yeah, sure. So Advanced Auto Science has been there for about 23 years now. Just doing general auto repair, specializing in Hondas and Acuras. And yeah, so we're just going for our license to sell used cars on our lot. We actually had a license before under a different company name, but I have since dissolved that company. So now I'm just trying to get it back for Advanced Auto Sciences.
And how many cars will be on the property for sale?
26 maximum.
Okay.
Realistically, probably not that many, but 26 will be the maximum.
Okay. Any questions from select board members? I don't see any, so I'll open it up to anyone from the, oh, sorry, Himija, you.
Sorry, yeah, just a quick question. I was wondering if you could comment about whether there's going to be a focus on like electric vehicles in your for your business.
No, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that. Certainly, if there's a market for them, we wouldn't have any objections to sell them. Not in particular, to be honest with you, but Hondas and Acuras primarily.
Great, thank you. And I would recommend it. Acton is definitely a EV friendly place, and we're trying to be so more, as you'll probably, if you hang around, we'll see. So yeah.
No, right on. Yeah, good call.
Okay, I will open it up to anyone from the public who might have a question or a comment on this license. Okay, I don't see anyone from the public. Any final comments from the board before we close the hearing? I will take a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Jim moves and
I'll second.
Dean seconds. Jim, would you call the roll, please?
Cool. To close the hearing, Imogen Agaretti,
Aye.
Fran Arsenault,
Aye.
Dean Charter,
Aye.
David Martin,
Aye.
Jim Snyder Grant also says aye. That's unanimous. 5-0.
Okay, the hearing is closed. Thank you, Mr. Hackett. So any final discussion here before we take a motion to approve the Class 2 auto dealer's license? No discussion. So I'll take a motion to approve a Class 2 auto dealer's license for Advanced Auto Sciences at 140 Great Road.
So moved.
Is there a second? Fran seconds. Quietly.
Sorry.
Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded. Jim, would you call the roll, please?
Absolutely. On the motion to approve the license, Imogen Nagaretti,
Aye.
Brian Arsenal,
Aye.
Dean Charter,
Aye.
David Martin,
Aye.
and Jim Snyder Grant also says aye. That's unanimous.
Great, thank you. That the license is approved. We'll move on, and now we have a presentation from the Ban the Bag group on 2 matters. And so, if
Anyone you'd like promoted?
yes, if you could promote Peter Berry to start, and if the other members of the group could raise their hands that would like to be promoted for the presentation.
Carolyn Platt and Lee Stuntz.
Yes. Hello and welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Peter. Peter, do you want me to present your slides, or do you want to share your screen?
If you could present the slides, that'd be great. For some reason, my computer's not detecting a camera, so unfortunately, I guess I'm not visually available. I don't know why that's happening.
We can hear you well, so that's okay.
Okay. All right, well, great. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to present our articles for the town warrant. If you could also promote Carolyn Platt, Lee Stuntz, and Caroline Tripp, if she's on participating in the meeting, that would be great as well.
So Carolyn and Lee's are already on.
Okay.
And
Who is the fourth one?
Carolyn Tripp. I don't know if she's available. She's in Puerto Rico, actually. So the internet is checkered down there. So
He's not available tonight, Peter.
okay. So we are asking the select board to place 2 articles in the warrant: the polystyrene and disposable plastic reduction bylaw, and an act authorizing the town to establish a minimum charge for checkout bags, which is a home rule petition.
Okay.
Next slide, please.
Okay, hold on 1 second. We're on Article 1 slide.
Yes, and you can move on to the next slide. So what this would do would be to ban polystyrene food serviceware, and which, for the reasons that polystyrene has negative environmental impacts, persistence of styrene for hundreds of years in the environment. They produce toxic fumes when incinerated. They get ingested by wildlife as they break down into microplastics, particularly, and plastic contamination of Acton's wetlands, green spaces, and roadsides. Polystyrene contributes to. They also have health impacts, styrenes and styrofoam, ingestion of microplastics by the food chain, and these can carry toxins and other pathogens which may be carcinogenic. And styrene is a possible carcinogenic according to the World Health Organization. Next slide, please. These are some of the findings on the scientific research. University of Newcastle, estimated average global human ingestion of microplastics at as much as 5 grams, which is the mass of a credit card, per week. Styrene, a chemical in polystyrene, was classified in 2018 by the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer as a probable carcinogen. Next slide, please. So what would be banned and when? All polystyrene, including clear foam, clear polystyrene, See the clamshell there is made of polystyrene, the clear clamshell. Foam polystyrene, there's examples of the foam clamshell, foam cups, foam plates, foam coolers, notorious for despoiling our beaches, knives, forks, and spoons, generally the black ones, more sturdy ones, are made of polystyrene. Those would be banned, and also the containers for takeout food made from polystyrene would not be able to be used by restaurants or sold by retail establishments in Acton. Next slide, please. We also are proposing, as part of this bylaw, to ban disposable plastic utensils, which may not be polystyrene, but are made of plastic and are generally not recycled. The recycling business is not able to efficiently recycle these items: straws, stirrers, chopsticks, and splash sticks, and they generally wind up on the side of the road or in the wetlands rather than being recycled. So we are also proposing, as part of this bylaw, to eliminate these disposable plastic utensils that are used once and thrown away. Next slide, please. These items would be acceptable. There are packaging made of sugarcane, or what they call bagasse, aluminum packaging, paper, other plastics other than polystyrene, number 1 and number 5, polyethylene products, compostable drinkware, and non-polystyrene cutlery and paper straws would not be banned under this bylaw. The bylaw does say that businesses would not automatically hand out these items, but they would be available upon request by a consumer or in a self-service dispenser, so that when you went to Wendy's, well, Wendy's is in Maynard, but if you went to McDonald's, you wouldn't automatically get a straw with your takeout order. You'd have to get it from the dispenser or ask the service person for a straw, and that would not be a plastic straw, it would be a paper straw. Next slide, please. Ben Jerome has already stepped up to the plate. Utensils available upon request. This is basically what you would see as you go into businesses in Acton, where you would not automatically get non-polystyrene food service ware or utensils, but if you asked for it, you could get either paper straws or other kinds of utensils or plastic non-polystyrene utensils. Next slide. Ban the Bag and More surveyed 56 businesses on Great Road in West Acton and along Main Street. 23% of the businesses are already using alternatives to polystyrene products. 75% plus used some polystyrene, especially straws, which are particularly environmentally unfriendly. And 3 businesses, only 3 of the 56 raised concerns about costs. Next slide, please. There are exceptions in the bylaw. We understand that this will have an impact on businesses. So we built in conditions that help the businesses. The Acton Board of Health may exempt a business for 6 months in the case of undue hardship. They have a large supply that they have just ordered of polystyrene packaging or food containers. They can get an exemption. This bylaw would not go into effect until January 1st, 2023. So there's a long period of time between town meeting and when the bylaw will become effective to allow businesses to adjust. Items purchased or prepared and packaged outside the town of Acton are permitted to be sold. So if business purchases eggs and foam polystyrene cartons that come from Pennsylvania, those would be allowed to be sold by that business or other food items that are packaged outside the town of Acton could be sold on polystyrene trays. Next slide, please. This bylaw is patterned after bylaws adopted by surrounding towns. Chelmsford, Concord, Lincoln, Maynard, Sudbury, Wayland, and Westford have already implemented these bans on polystyrene products. These Donnellan's, Roach Brothers, and Stop and Shop have already configured their operations to respond to polystyrene ban bylaws in several of the above towns. Next slide, please. So that completes the presentation on Article 1, which is the polystyrene ban. Article 2, and let me just say that, you know, in summing up Article 1, certainly plastic has a mixed blessing to society. It's been a tremendous help to technology and advancement in products and medical products and other things to improve health and society. On the other hand, it's become a major issue in pollution. The amount of plastic that has been produced since it was invented now outweighs the entire biomass of the earth, the weight of it, and it's polluting our environment. It's a 4-alarm fire at this point. It needs to be responded to. It pollutes the oceans, and locally it pollutes our wetlands, our open spaces. We are not proposing to ban all plastic, just polystyrene, which is particularly uneconomical and hard to recycle. So we're hoping that businesses would move away from polystyrene products, but to use more environmentally friendly plastic products, which can be more easily recycled and acted. The polystyrene recycling that they have once a month at the transfer station still does not accept food containers, and so those can't be recycled at all. And they tend to get put into the waste stream. So Article 2 would authorize the Select Board to petition the General Court for a Home Rule Act authorizing Acton to establish a minimum charge for checkout bags. The reason this is a Home Rule Act is because the Attorney General rejected Lincoln's bylaw, which in her opinion violated the Home Rule amendment to the Massachusetts Constitution because it regulated the relationship between merchants and consumers, which went beyond the scope of the Home Rule Act amendment. So this would authorize a minimum 15-cent charge for each checkout bag, paper bags. Next slide, please. The reasons for the minimum bag charge, it incentivizes consumers to reuse checkout bags. It's environmentally responsible. It contributes to less products going into the waste stream, provides consumer choice to pay the bag charge or bring reusable bags. It generates some revenue for the retailer, 15 cents per bag, reduces waste and associated cost of recycling disposal. Next slide, please. The bylaw stipulates the Acton Board of Health or its agent would have the authority to enforce both bylaws, and it could adopt and amend rules and regulations as appropriate. And I believe it's at the end. Article 1 and 2 advance the Town of Acton's sustainability goals and protect human and environmental health. With Article 1, the polystyrene ban, our group would use the time to gather as much information as we can about availability of alternative products that we could provide either to the Board of Health or directly to Acton businesses to help them find and purchase alternative products that cost the least and provide the best service to the business. The 15-cent bag charge does have an equity concept associated with it. There are people who might find even 15 cents for each bag to be a cost that they could not afford. The group was successful when the town adopted their proposed ban on plastic bags in providing assistance to people who needed it. And so we think we can, there are nonprofit organizations that will provide reusable bags to distribute to people who might not be able to afford to purchase them. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Presentation, unless Ms. Stuntz or Platt has something else to add.
Yes, this is Carolyn Platt, 100 Newtown Road. I just want to say that Cheryl Ball sent the Ban the Bag and More flyer to the businesses in Acton, saying, please contact me if you have any concerns or questions. And she did not hear back from one business. And she was quite impressed.
Thank you. And Lee, did you have a comment as well?
Just a very short comment. I wanted to make clear what we were actually suggesting or asking you to do for us. We do not have a citizen's petition for these articles to put them on the town warrant. We would deeply appreciate if the Board of Selectmen would do so. And then beyond that, we would of course love to have your active support for these articles. And thank you so much for letting us present.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add that we have been to the Board of Health. We met with the Board of Health last week. They voted 4-1 to support the article. The banned polystyrene article, they took no position on the 15-cent charge for checkout bags. We are meeting with the FinCom next week to seek their input and support on this if possible. We will be approaching the Economic Development Committee to also get their views on this, and so we are trying to gather as much support and provide information to the appropriate town boards and committees as we can.
Thank you. So, members of the board, as Lee said, we'll take 2 votes at the end of this process to put each of these articles on the warrant for our annual town meeting. But before that, we'll get comments and questions from the board and then from the public. So, any member of the board have a question or a comment for the presenters? Dean, I saw you first in, Jim.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of questions. I know that as of a little more than a week ago, the Economic Development Committee was unaware of this, and I had alerted them when I saw some things going on about it. They're very concerned about the impact on local businesses of this. Likewise, the Council on Aging, this could have some possible impacts on a lot of the operations, food service operations at the COA, not only within the dining room, but also with the Meals on Wheels program, converting all of the utensils and their whole operation to these new products. I don't have any particular axe to grind in favor of polystyrene. It's just there are a lot of possible unforeseen consequences of this ban that I don't know have been fully explored yet. We got sort of a preview of this petition probably 6 months ago. And at that point, I asked if I could see a list of information as far as sources for these other materials and relative costs. And I was assured that that would be sent to us. Well, here we are 6 months later, and what I hear is you folks are going to spend the time from now until town meeting to come up with a list. Time is getting really short. I think it's very important that there be an additional outreach to all of these businesses to see what kind of impact this might have on them. I'm speaking specifically about the plastic ban. My question also is that if there's no cost impact or very minimal cost impact, I wonder why stores like Stop and Shop and Donlands and Roach Brothers that are apparently complying with this in other towns, why they've not voluntarily begun to implement it here in Acton. It would seem like it would certainly make their supply chain issues a lot easier if they just had one particular set of products and utensils they use throughout their entire array of stores. So I suspect that there are probably more things going on than what meets the eye, whether it's cost or whether it's how compatible some of these items are. So I think there's a great deal that needs to be discussed before we move forward, and certainly before this thing gets voted on at town meeting. One of the issues, again, going back to the Council on Aging, right now, when they do have in-person meal programs, which they'll be starting up shortly, all of their products are being provided by Minuteman Senior Services, who said, we can provide you with reusable dishware and silverware and what have you, but obviously those have to be washed. They've never had to do any dishwashing there in the new senior center of routine cutlery. So that's going to end up having to bring in some town staff or some kind of staff to do the cleaning. So I think that could have some financial impacts. Likewise, with the bag charge of 15 cents a bag, exactly how much impact that's going to have on folks. The 15 cents might not seem like much to the rest of us, but it could have an impact on senior citizens. So I'm not going to say whether I'd support or not these particular articles, but I think there's a great deal more thought that has to go into it before this is ready to go to town meeting, and certainly before we're ready to put them on town meeting warrant. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw Carolyn's hand go up first to respond. So I'll let her respond, Peter, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I won't respond to all of them. Thank you for your comments. One thing that we found in terms of utensils, nobody is using polystyrene utensils. And I know the schools are not, and I'm sure that, the Council on Aging is not. The other thing, we did supply you with lists and costs. Mel Anderson, the fellow at the Sustainability Office, did research for us, and we also researched, and there's a tremendous, it's what we would tell you even 2 weeks ago might not be the same today. There's a tremendous change. It's very volatile, the pricing. Anyway, those are my 2 comments.
Thank you. Other members have comments they'd like to make. Lisa, if it's okay, I'd rather not have 3 responses to each question. Okay. So I'll choose whichever of you has your hand up to respond. I think I let Jim go next, then Fran, then Himijan.
Thanks, Tim. Few points. In terms of the outreach to businesses that Dean mentioned, I'm thinking that individual conversations with 56 of those businesses and the mailing to every single business that's a retail establishment is actually very effective and very complete outreach already. Another point is that in terms of the difficulty of making the conversion or why stores haven't done it already, what we learned is that 25% of the stores have already made this change. They're already not using polystyrene products. So it's apparently not a big barrier. What else? In our packet, after the presentation is a bunch of information, including prices and products from 2 different vendors that are replacements. So, and if you're curious about the replacements, I might recommend looking through that packet item. And just a reminder that if products are packaged outside of Acton, the ban doesn't apply. The ban only applies when a retail establishment within Acton is, adding the material right before selling it. The other comment is just how I think about this in terms of climate change and our need to use less fossil fuels. Plastics are pretty much, you take fossil fuels and you turn them into plastic. You don't need a lot else. And fossil fuel companies are investing heavily in plastics manufacturing facilities in the hopes of extending the demand for fossil fuels as they get phased out in other areas, as consumers and the legal system turn away from the use of fossil fuels. So it's sort of another way of their pushing their dangerous product onto us. So I'm all in favor of things that reduce the use of plastic for that reason as well. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Fran.
I'm so excited moving in the direction of this, even if it's baby steps at first. And I echo what Jim said about things being packaged elsewhere won't be affected. And I also view the bag charge as encouraging folks to bring their own bags. And I think that is a lot of people do that now. And I hope it would just encourage more folks to do that. So I am all for this.
Thank you. Imogen.
I have one quick question and then multiple comments. So my quick question is the 15 cents bag charge for plastic bag, or is it for paper bags, like any type of material?
Lee, you want to respond?
It's for any checkout bag. Our ban on plastic checkout bags, the light plastic checkout bags, which were so ubiquitous 3 years ago before we put in the other bylaw, are still not acceptable. But any checkout bags you would be getting in Acton now would be charged 15 cents.
Great. Thanks for the clarification. So my background is in environmental health, and so I feel very strongly about this. I think that there are viable alternatives for polystyrene. I think this is something we can implement in Acton. This group has already done a lot of great outreach into the local community to get their thoughts and feedback, which I applaud. And I do want to note that there is, polystyrene is harmful. The way that we've learned about it in school is from an occupational health standpoint. So styrene, which is one of the materials used to create compounds such as polystyrene, can have very significant effects, especially on workers who use it. It's been shown to be carcinogenic, like your presentation outlined, and many other underlying health effects can result from it. And so there is movement to try to reduce the use of polystyrene. And exactly like Jim said, it's not great for the environment. There are some people that, do correctly say technically that polystyrene can be recyclable, but it's not cost effective to recycle it. Single stream recycling oftentimes does not have the capacity to recycle polystyrene. And so that's a whole other issue in terms of having to recycle this. So ultimately, it does make sense to ban it. And I do want to add some color that there are efforts going on in the state right now to actually ban polystyrene. So this actually would be us in many ways responding to what is a statewide response to ban polystyrene. So I think that overall, this is something I would recommend we support, and this is something that is in alignment with our sustainable goals as part of Acton, but also really contributes to a statewide and frankly a nationwide effort to really try to reduce harmful chemicals that people are coming into contact with. And that is all.
Thank you. I just want to say that other municipalities around the country have done the same thing, and there's not been any problem, right? There's no great increase in cost. There's no, problems getting takeout food or whatever. It's fine. So some cities have even banned all plastic utensils, regardless of material. And you go there and you'll notice you get bamboo utensils, which are a little bit more expensive, but they're actually much nicer to use. And polystyrene in particular, but really any plastic is really difficult to recycle. Often plastic types are mixed. Plastics are difficult to sort. It's just a really very difficult thing. And both of these proposed articles are prompt the state legislature to do their job, right? When the state legislature sees a great number of communities doing things like this on their own, then, whether it's they feel they have political cover or whatever, then they do something so that the state is unified in its approach. And then, our bylaws would be overridden. But in the meantime, it helps the state legislature move forward. So I'm also in favor of this. Carolyn, I'll let you make a comment before I call on the members of the public.
Just a quickie. In this bylaw would not be overridden. There's a line in it that says the stricter bylaw. If the state passed one and it was weaker, although ours is modeled after the state, but ours would not be overridden. Thank you.
Yes, unless the Attorney General decides they're in conflict.
Okay.
Right. If the Attorney General agrees with you, then we're fine.
Okay.
So, Justin, would you call on members of the public with their hands raised, please?
Absolutely. We have Deborah Symes.
Deborah, please go ahead. I see that you're unmuted, but you're quiet. Justin, why don't we give someone else a chance and come back to Deborah?
Okay, I got Tom Gillespie.
Thank you, Tom Gillespie, Thoreau Road in Acton. My only suggestion regarding the 15-cent charge on the bags would be to take a look at options when people are buying groceries through, online pickup. When we do that, we don't really have a choice except to use the bags that, the vendor has used to collect the items, etc. So I understand the purpose. I support the purpose. When we don't do online pickup, we will bring in recyclable bags, etc. But it might be, again, as you think about, for seniors, for other people for whom the pickup and the online delivery, which has come about through pandemic, but has been a help for many people, wouldn't sort of like unintendedly incur the extra charges as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Deborah, would you like to try again?
Okay, how's this?
Better.
No idea what the difference is, but great. Thank you. So a couple of quick things. One is in terms of costs associated, I know Dean was talking about potential costs at this, at the senior center or whatever. I've made this global comment before, I'll make it again, which is when we talk about the cost of anything, we have to stop thinking about how many pennies am I handing over to the cashier or whatever. We really have to start thinking about costs in a much broader way, which is life cycle costs, and which puts, the penny or two on the dollar against the human health and environmental costs that we are paying already and will continue to ratchet up
for all different kinds of things. So I really encourage us to have a much broader sense of, a broader definition of how we talk about cost. The true accounting would be a great thing to incorporate into town deliberations. The other thing is that, for example, at the senior center, I feel like the town, and in many ways we are doing this, and I'm so grateful, but I do feel like the town really has to model good behavior for all of us. And that if the senior center has been doing throwaway serviceware all these years, I'm a little horrified. I didn't know that. And it's time that stopped happening. If we have to use real plates and real utensils and figure out a way to get them washed, great. We have to lead. We have to encourage this kind of behavior. Our throwaway culture is killing us. Convenience is going to kill us. And I also really appreciate Himmage's comments about the health impacts of styrene, because it is a nasty compound, and particularly for people who are in the manufacture of it, it's just nasty as all get out. So I super support these. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have a call-in user.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Sarah from West Acton. This is ready to go to town meeting and let the town meeting decide. I think that the research is fantastic. I have a couple questions and then more comments. It's two separate articles, right? The bag fee is separate from the styrene. Is that correct?
Yes, one's the bag fee is a home rule petition, so it's not a bylaw.
Okay, so the styrene ban will just be a straight bylaw. Is that correct?
Yes.
We're not asking permission to do it. We're just doing it, right?
That's right.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I've had this issue with the senior center and the community supper for a long time because it's just all throwaway. And I have offered to do a fundraiser to get dishwashers. I personally offered to go wash the dishes, and it's like, no, we're busy, using, this throwaway stuff. And it's like, I totally get it. But at some point, we've got to make a shift in our society. And I think that the washing of the dishes is an actually really wonderful community activity. I personally tried to compost forks. Like a year later, it's still forks. And the other thing is this thing about the home rule petition. I hope that you engage in what's called, from what I understand, a home rule review, as opposed to asking the legislature to approve it, which takes forever and won't probably happen. That the town can pay for a town lawyer to go and get a home rule review, and if that passes, we can just like what Concord did for the single-use water bottles, just go ahead and pass it as a law. Because Cambridge is charging for bags. How are they doing it? So, and my last comment is that if we can ban the use of these polystyrene materials, then we could ban the use of chemical fertilizers, at least by contractors, right? That would help with water. And I forgot to mention my concern earlier that the water protection part of the water study should be given higher priority than water use expansion. So besides that, that's what I have. Thank you very much. Bring it to town meeting.
Thank you. I think that's it on the public comments. Anybody else on the board have a question or comment before we let our presenters go? No? Okay. Thank you, Peter, Carolyn, and Lee.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, so members of the board will take two votes here. The first motion I would take is to put the proposed polystyrene ban bylaw article on the annual town meeting warrant this year.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, so Jim moves and Himmagesh seconds. So discussion on this one. Any final discussion or Dean?
I think we need to have a distinction and just a clarification. I might be in favor of saying, well, we'll at least put them on the warrant. But I think I've got some hesitation about whether the select board would recommend these based on the fact that we've not really had, in my opinion, sufficient public input into this, nor have we heard from some of the boards. For instance, Finance Committee is going to weigh in on it, Economic Development Committee, Council on Aging. So I think there's certainly a distinction between whether it's going to go on the warrant and whether or not we would recommend it.
So we usually have a session before town meeting where we decide what to recommend or not. So I think this vote is just to put it on the warrant, and we can come back with input from those other committees and decide whether or not to recommend it. Of course, the Finance Committee gets their own recommendation listed in the warrant, but if the EDC or COA come back with comments, that's fine. So this motion that I proposed and that was made and seconded is just to put it on the warrant. Any other comments, questions? Okay, Jim, please call the roll on this.
Okay, on the question of putting the polystyrene ban on the warrant, Imogen Agawati,
Aye.
Fran Arsenal,
With pleasure. Aye.
Dean Charter,
Aye.
David Martin,
Aye.
and Jim Snyder says aye. That's unanimous.
Great. And for the second item, I would take a motion to put the home rule petition article to allow a minimum charge for checkout bags onto this year's annual town meeting warrant. So Jim moves and Hemingway seconds. Any final discussion someone would like to make here? So I think, by the way, one member of the public made a comment for online pickup. I would not be in favor of accepting online pickup. In fact, I see the charge here as an opportunity for invention, right? I already know of local businesses that do call-in things where they will deliver your stuff in a plastic crate, which they take back, right? And so it's reused. Maybe they have online bags that you also return. They have a reusable bag that is, you pick up your books or whatever you're picking up from an online order, you take it home, and the next day you drop it back by the store. In other words, I just think it's an opportunity for invention here to not have a throwaway thing. And if someone wants to pay 15 cents, that just gets 15 cents added to the order. So I would not be in favor of accepting that. Other discussions? Okay. Jim, could you call the roll, please?
Sure. On the question of adding the 15-cent minimum bag fee to a home rule petition for the town meeting, Imogen Agawati.
Aye.
Fran Arsenal.
Aye.
Dean Charter.
Aye.
David Martin.
Aye.
And Jim Snyder. That's unanimous. We put those items on the warrant.
Thank you. We will move on to our next item, which is to discuss options for the green energy mix and the upcoming Acton Power Choice procurement. I don't know between John and Jim.
Yeah, sure. I can kick it off. I actually we're gonna Paul Gromer, who works with us on the Acton Power Choice program, has prepared a presentation to update the board on where we are with the Acton Power Choice program and lay out some of the decisions that we're going to have to make in the next few weeks as it relates to the future of Acton Power Choice. Paul is here. I'm sorry, Jim, did you want to say anything else before we kick that off? Thank you. Paul?
Wonderful. So thanks very much, Sean. I do have a presentation. I can share my own screen if that's best, whatever's most convenient.
That's fine. Please go ahead. You're welcome.
Excellent. All right, can folks see the slides there?
Yes.
Excellent. So as John said, I'm here to speak about the Acton Power Choice program. I'm going to just cover 3 topics today. The first, just to set the stage, just spend a minute with some background on what these types of programs are all about. Acton Power Choice is a community choice aggregation program, so I'll just give you a little bit of background on that for folks who may not be familiar. Then I'll give an update on Acton's program, the results to date. And then, as John said, what I'm going to do is to tee up some of the most important issues that the town will need to decide in connection with moving the program forward, and in particular, the procurement of a new electricity supply for the program. So to start off, just an overview on community choice aggregation. What is it? It's really just a form of group electricity purchasing where the town selects an electricity provider who's then available to the residents and businesses in town. And it's a town-sponsored and vetted alternative to the offers you get over the phone or in the mail from competitive electric supply companies. Community choice aggregation is very popular in Massachusetts. More than 150 communities have active programs, including the major cities, Boston, Worcester, and Cambridge, and also quite a few communities in the general Acton area, including Lexington and Lincoln and Carlisle and Bedford and Sudbury and a host of others. It's particularly popular in this part of the state. So now let's talk for a minute about Acton's own program, Acton Power Choice. Some background, the program serves about 71% of the electricity accounts in town, and that's nearly twice as many, 2.5 times as many as the 2 alternatives put together, which are Eversource Basic Service and the individual competitive supplier. So very popular, 75% of accounts in town are part of the program. If we look at one of the key features of the program, it's price stability and savings. By providing a longer-term fixed price, Acton Power Choice can protect customers from the variability that you get with Eversource Basic Service pricing. And that's what we see in the graph down below, with the blue line being Eversource Basic Service, which is what you get if you haven't chosen the Acton Power Choice program or an alternative. And then the red line is the price of the Acton Power Choice. And you'll see Eversource Basic Service bumps up and down, changes every 6 months, whereas the town's price has been much more stable. And then another advantage is that a program like Acton Power Choice can produce savings. Typically a goal for a program like this is to try to beat the annual average of that Eversource price that changes every 6 months. Acton has been particularly successful and so far has saved customers more than $2.5 million. As compared to the Eversource Basic Service price. And then there's a little disclaimer down at the bottom of the slide, something I'm required to say, but I should say anyway, which is that we can talk about what's happened so far, but the town can never guarantee that there will be savings in the future. And that's because the savings are relative to the Eversource prices, and those prices change every 6 months, and the future ones aren't known. So the town can never promise the future, but it can talk about the record to date, which has been very successful. Another great advantage or benefit of the program is the ability to provide additional renewable energy as part of the power supply. And to give customers a choice about both price and the amount of renewable electricity that's in the mix that they receive. The program has 3 options. There's a default option, which is what you get unless you choose one of the others. And that currently has 10% extra renewable electricity in it. There's an option to pay more and to get 100% renewable electricity. And there's an option to pay less and get no additional renewable electricity and get the lowest possible price. And this is really a key issue for the next power supply contract, and a key issue that's before the town now is how much additional renewable energy to put in that standard product. That's a critical question, and we'll talk about that for a minute now. So let's talk now about the issues facing the town now with regard to the program, and in particular the procurement of a new electricity supply. Just as background, the way these programs are implemented is through a contract between the town and an electricity supplier. It's a no-cost contract for the town. The town just gives the electricity supplier really the right to provide electricity supply to the participants in the program. This contract, though, establishes the program prices and other key program elements, such as the amount of additional renewable electricity. The town has had 2 contracts so far. We're coming up towards the end of the current one, and so that's why it's time now for the town to start thinking about the next procurement and how you'd like the program to look going forward. So what are the key issues? One is, and this is sort of a background fact more than anything, which is that electricity prices are up quite a bit. If you look all the way to the right of the graph there, you can see that electricity prices are the highest they've been since late 2014. We've had a long period of very low prices, but they're back up again now, and maybe going a little higher given the events in Europe. This isn't a disadvantage for the Acton's program. Everybody buying electricity is going to face these same prices. Eversource Basic Service, which is what the town's program is compared to, similarly is going to be absorbing these high wholesale prices. The town has done very well because of the contract you have in place. You've been able to protect customers from these prices for the first 6 or 9 months or so that we've had these high prices. But when you go out to bid for a new supply contract, you are going to be seeing these high prices the way everybody else is. The next question is to choose the amount of additional renewable energy in your standard product. And this chart shows all the communities that have additional renewable energy, or in particular Class 1 renewable energy, which we'll talk more about in a second, and what percentage they have. As you'll see, Acton at 10% is pretty much in the middle right now, with about half the communities having 5% or less, and the other half having 10% or more. And the range is all the way from 1% up to 62% over in Newton, which has the highest in the state. As I mentioned, Acton has increased from the first contract to the second, and it's quite common for towns to increase the amount of additional renewable energy as the program moves along. Many communities have done that. Natick has done that. Lexington did it. Quite a few of the others on the list. So one issue is the amount of renewable electricity. A second is the type of additional renewable electricity. And so I'm going to bring up another slide here, which in the blue shows those same percentages that we looked at before. And that's percentage of Class 1 renewable electricity, which is the highest quality. Some communities purchase, in addition to the Class 1 renewable electricity, they'll buy some what's called national renewable electricity, which is much less expensive. And they do that in order to get their total up to 100% in a more affordable way. So they'll buy some of the Class 1s, which you'll see in the blue bars there, and then some, typically much more, of the national to reach 100%. This is a strategy most towns don't follow. A handful do, including, as we see there, Lexington does, Swampscott, Sudbury, a few others. It's a little bit controversial. The communities who do it think that there's value in getting to 100%, and that this is the only, for them, the decision they made was the only affordable way to get there. Other communities will believe that the Class 1 renewable electricity is what's creating value, and I'll speak to that in a moment. They want to do as much as they can of that, but then not to go further and add in renewable electricity that brings less value. So what's this value? What's the difference? So Class 1 renewable electricity is from generators in New England or in adjacent areas, New York State or Eastern Canada. And the great advantage is that purchasing the Class 1 renewable electricity creates a demand for more renewable electricity, so it leads to the development of additional renewable energy projects. The cost, in Acton for a typical resident, it's about each 10% of Class 1 renewable electricity is about $250 a month. Importantly, that's $250 a month more than the lowest possible price. It's not necessarily $250 a month more than Eversource Basic Service, which the residents would have if there were no town program. Up until now, the town has produced savings relative to basic service, even with additional renewable electricity. So it's $250 more than the lowest you could pay, but not $250 more than the alternative if you didn't have a program. Comparing the Class 1s to the national renewable electricity, that's from generators outside of New England. Purchasing those does little to create the demand for more renewable electricity projects. It doesn't help to bring more renewable electricity online. And the cost is much lower there. It's about a tenth. So, a 10% of additional the national renewable electricity is about 25 cents a month as opposed to $250 a month for the Class 1s. So that's kind of a quick high-level walk through these issues. Just to talk for a second about next steps, the town's at the beginning of this process now of making a decision about what the program should look like going forward. Our next step will be to get from competitive suppliers indicative prices. These are non-binding prices, but they'll enable the town to really dig into these questions about how much is the town program likely to cost relative to basic service, how much is specifically to Acton will these different types of renewable electricity cost to help the town to make a more informed decision about how it wants to go forward. We'll do that over the next several weeks, and then we're looking to go for to go out to bid for a final decision in early May. So that's my quick overview of Acton Power Choice and the issues that the program's facing right
now. Questions from members of the board for Mr. Grohl? So I see Fran's hand. All right. Fran?
I just have a quick question. What is the advantage of being at the 100%? Forgive if this is a stupid question, because it just makes sense to the mass Class 1 seems like a better deal.
Yes, and exactly right. First of all, it's not a stupid question at all. It's an excellent question that gets to the heart of things, I think. Most communities view it the same way you did, that they make a decision about how much extra they want to spend on renewable electricity, and they put that into getting as many Class 1s as they can, and they stop there, as opposed to taking some of what they could spend and spending it on the national renewable electricity, which has less value. So the way you're thinking of it is consistent with the way the majority of towns look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Jim?
Just a couple comments. First of all, for those of you that haven't met Paul before, so he's the CEO of Peregrine, who is our consultant on the Acton Power Choice program. And, so Paul mentioned that this is a no-cost program for the town. What's also true is that we don't have to pay Peregrine for the consulting either. They get what is it, like 1/100 of a penny for each kilowatt hour that comes through there?
It's tiny, yes, tiny.
Yeah. But it turns out, we buy enough kilowatt hours, that's enough to keep Paul in a decent suit. So I just want to make sure that people understood Paul's role in this process, that he has years of experience in energy and electricity, and has brought a really excellent team together at Peregrine, and we've been really lucky to have him. The other thing I wanted to clarify is so Paul described the process. One of the key parts of the process is that the time between getting the final bids and making the choice about which vendor to go with and exactly which program design to use is a very small period of time. It's not going to be time for the board, for example, to intervene. It's going to be typically the town manager as the chief procurement officer makes that choice, surrounded by whatever advice he can get from finance department and other folks in town. So our input into this process is now in terms of what direction we'd like the program to head in. So I just want to give that background. And then, David, whenever you're ready, I'm happy to give my opinions about the directions to head in, but I didn't want to bypass the process of asking questions first.
No. You can give your opinions, but I want to say that we will probably come back here to the board and make a final decision as to how we want to go in about a month. And then you're right. So what we did in our current contract is we gave the town manager guidelines and allowed him to sign the final contract. We would probably do that the same here, but we'd probably make that final decision in a month if I'm fully understanding the process. So 2 meetings from now. I don't think we're making any decisions tonight, but if we do, that's fine. Jim, why don't you go ahead and give your opinion, and then Dean, you're next.
Well, I have practically a speech, so why don't we have Dean go first?
Okay.
Okay, I don't have a speech. A couple of questions that I've got. One is, I noticed that the class ones, you're talking about getting power from New England and adjacent regions. And I think you mentioned something about Eastern Canada. And I guess 2 questions in that. One is have you considered, there's been a lot of controversy, especially in the Quebec area and parts of Ontario, with the environmental and social impact of these huge hydroelectric projects that generate a lot of this electricity. Also some concerns from folks, just the equity issues of eating up a lot of Canada under a huge lake and shipping the electricity down to the rather more wealthy Americans. So I think that's one thing I'd like to hear a little discussion about. Second, as far as getting the electricity from there to here, I know there's been a lot of problems with attempting to upgrade the infrastructure going through either Maine, New Hampshire, or Vermont in order to get the electricity down here. So what kind of impacts have been considered about that? And how is that going to impact the cost of the whole project? The last item that, not for Mr. Gromer so much, is I know there's been some discussion about changing what the default level of renewable will be that people will see, and I certainly would like to address that in more detail, either later on tonight or perhaps in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gromer, do you have any response to his first questions?
Yes, absolutely. So the first question was about electricity from large hydro projects in Canada. So the good news there is that this definition of Class 1 RECs, which the town has used for the types of renewable electricity it wants to buy, is based on a Massachusetts state standard. And that standard excludes large hydro projects from being eligible. So electricity from large hydro, which you're exactly right, it exists in Canada, it's an issue in Canada, and some of it is imported into the US. That's not part of the equation here. The only electricity from Canada that counts, or at least the great majority of it, none of it is large hydro, and just about all of it is wind. So it's big wind turbines in Canada that's supplying the Class 1 renewable electricity. And then with regard to the transmission, which you asked about, which is another hot issue in the energy field, in order to qualify as Class 1 renewable electricity, the electricity has to be physically imported. If it's coming from Canada or New York, it has to be physically imported into New England, which means the transmission infrastructure has to exist now. So there is a big debate about whether to build additional transmission lines, but we aren't facing that with regard to what Acton will be looking looking to buy at this time. It will only be electricity where there's already an ability to bring it into the region.
Heminger.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions as well. The first is, will this have any effect on electricity reliability in different parts of town? And the second question, kind of piggybacking on Dean's question, you mentioned that there likely won't be any new transmission that needs to be added, but will there be, or do you foresee there to be any other infrastructure changes with regards to this? And then the third question was actually with regards to the 3 power choices that you outlined at the beginning. I was wondering if, is this something that like we make the decision on, or is this like an individual based decision on like what plan you go into? And then this is kind of like the fourth question, like tied with that. Is this like group electricity purchasing something that is done like at the level of the town, because these charts are based on town, or is this something like based on like area or neighborhoods, or is it more granular than at the town level? So those are my clarification questions.
Great, so I'll try to address those. So the first one is about whether programs like this might affect electricity reliability for the town. And the answer to that, fortunately, is no. So all of the reliability questions, making sure that the wires are in place for storing electricity in the event of an outage, all those things continue to be done by Eversource just the way they do it now. So electricity is, I won't go into a long speech, but divided into 2 parts: distribution, which is the poles and the wires and the meters, and electricity supply. Eversource does the distribution part no matter what. So they take care of all of that, and your service isn't affected in any way by a program like this. Similarly, you asked about maybe changes in the electric grid over time. Nothing we would do in the program will have a direct impact on that, but it is certainly the case that all of the changes in the electricity industry, including the trend towards more renewable electricity, are creating some stresses on the electric transmission system and even the distribution system too. And so that's something that the utilities are dealing with at a sort of a macro level. So not due to Acton in particular, but it's definitely an issue that's out there. You also asked about the different products. Let me see if I can get back to that slide. Forgive me for... Yes, okay, so here we go. So there are 3 choices within the program, and you asked who's making the decisions here. Is it the town or is it the individuals? So it's a little bit of a combination of the 2. So what the town does is the town, if we can use a restaurant analogy, the town sets the menu, and then the individuals decide which things they want to buy off the menu. So the town decides what are the 3 choices. You decide how much renewable electricity is included in each. Through a competitive process, you determine the price for each. And very importantly, you decide how much renewable energy is in that standard product, which is, there has to be one product that people get if they don't choose something else. So that's like the automatic one. So you decide the nature of the automatic one. But then the individual residents get to decide among those 3, which ones do they want. So that's the way that works. And then your final question was whether this is all happening at the town level, or maybe it's more granular than that or micro than that. And the answer there is it's at the town. It's all at the town level.
Great. I only have one question on the slide that has where you had $2.50 per month or 25 cents per month. What does the per month mean there as a unit? I don't understand the cost per. Is that an average cost per household per month?
Correct. That's exactly right. So that's the cost that a typical household would pay given the amount of electricity that a typical household uses. So it's the price for these additional renewable electricity, which in the case of the mass class 1s would be, it's about 0.4 cents for each kilowatt hour. multiply that by the typical use of a residence in Acton, and you get to $2.50 a month.
Okay, and our 100% green is all class 1 right now.
Yes, it is.
That's what I thought. So for Jim and Dean, I know you've been very reticent to give your opinion, but I think that's what this is for, right? If we're not discussing what we're thinking, I don't know what we're doing, right? Because the next time we have to, we have to give some guidance here to the town manager to what to explore. Next time we get presented with some options, we say, yeah, go sign the best one you can find, and then, we do it. So I don't know which of you wants to speak first, but Jim, why don't you go?
Okay. So the first thing is that whatever program we design, people are going to be faced with, who look at their bills, are going to be faced with a cost shock, right? So if you've been an Eversource customer through this time, as Paul was explaining, the bills are broken up into supply and the distribution and the supply. The supply rates went up by 50% with Eversource. It was just an astonishingly huge increase. Now, around here, with our typical size bills, our distribution and supply are about equal. So that was like overall a 25% increase, but still a lot. So whatever program design we choose, people are going to be looking at higher bills than what they've been used to for the last 3 years. The direction to go to set our default to be at 100% class 1 renewables, which is what I'd recommend. It has a tremendously outsized impact on our climate goals because of the large amount of electricity we use in town and how much that cleans up the electricity. There's a second level of effect, which is that as we recommend and as people take advantage of the ability to have more electric cars or switch their houses to be heated by electricity, that uses more electricity. So having more renewable supply makes that step even more powerful from an emissions point of view. So on the one hand, I think it's consistent with our climate goals to have a default choice that's 100% renewable. On the other hand, because of the financial shock that's going to be, I think we have to do at least 3 things if we're going to do that. First of all, we have to create a clear and widespread communication about the ability for people to change their levels. So I don't know whether we would have 1 level or 2 levels other than this default at 100%, but we need to communicate to everyone that if there's a financial issue for them, there's no cost to change. You can change anytime, and here's the other levels you can choose. The other thing I think we need to do is to create a clear and targeted communication to people that would be eligible for Eversource's subsidized rates. The regulatory mechanisms in Massachusetts require that the utilities offer these subsidized rates to almost anyone that gets, one of those any of the means-tested programs like Mass Health or, the Women, Infant, and Children, the Chapter 115 Veterans Benefits, or about a dozen other means-tested programs. If you're on those, you can get 30 or 40% off your electricity bill. And there's only about 300 households in Acton who are signed up for those subsidized rates. And it's really easy to do the math and see that there are a lot more people than that who are eligible. So we have to be bringing that news to people, in any case. But I think especially with the electricity rate increases they're about to see. And finally, at the last town meeting, we agreed that we should have this, pursue a low-income community solar system, which would give additional discounts to people who are getting those subsidized rates who are in the Acton Power Choice program. And right now that program is kind of tied up in legal and regulatory hurdles, which we have to keep encouraging the staff to get through those. And they are trying really hard. Paul's included in that process, but we got to get through that. But with those things in place, I I think the most consistent thing to do for Acton in terms of our climate goals is to have the default choice be 100% renewable, and then let people who want to or need to opt in.
Thank you. Dean?
So I agree with about 99% of what Jim has said. And certainly I think this program has been very successful and has done a great job as far as equalizing the ups and downs of the electricity market, and giving people these choices. And as far as the rapidity with which the town manager is going to have to make the decision, something to akin to what I faced when I was doing the energy purchasing for the town facilities. You didn't get 24 hours. Typically, we get like a 4-hour window to make a yes or no, and that's obviously not any time that the board is going to be able to adjourn a meeting with 48 hours notice. So I think we certainly do need to give the town manager some clear guidance. The only difference that I have with Jim, and I suppose it's a pretty significant one, is that I think having a 100% renewable option is certainly important, and I hope that's part of the mix that we end up with. But I'm really skeptical of the idea that people that are on the default right now will automatically go into this new default and be faced with this potentially significant increase in cost without them knowing it. People have accepted that the town is providing this. Many people probably don't even realize what's happening because it's all sort of behind the scenes. But I think that rather than say, well, we're going to raise your bill, and if you don't like it, you can opt out of it, I think it's much more important that the town educate the folks up front and say, there's still going to be the default option will be something similar to what we have right now, but here are all the good reasons why you should go with the 100%. So I think Jim and I are both looking at it from the same point of view, that the 100% renewable is certainly the most desirable. But I have some real process issues with, it seems like almost deceptive practice, deceptive marketing, to change the rules of the game to these people and then tell them, well, you can opt out of it if you don't like it. I think they should be able to opt in. People should be educated. They should make a clear decision. So I would not be in favor of making the default to 100%.
So it's actually tough. Some months ago, we could have made the default 100% for a very reasonable price, and now that's probably not possible, just by coincidence of when our contracts come here. I have a little bit of a problem making it 100% renewable and then trying to advertise to everybody to downgrade, because once they've downgraded, they're in the lower tier forever unless they take their own time and come up, right? No matter how many contracts we go forward, and so it kind of limits our progression in the future. I don't know which would be more environmentally advantageous, right? To have to switch everybody by default to 100% green, and then to strongly advertise that everybody should opt down to the lowest level, or to choose a compromise price and get everybody there and say this is the best. We've judged this to be the best compromise between price and renewable. I don't know. That's a tough call, right? I really have a tough time in trying to advertise that people should downgrade, right? The people who ask about it now, they figure out they can downgrade, but I would want to have some kind of program encouraging people to downgrade. I just have a hard time with that. So I'm not sure what to do there. Unfortunately, price really comes into this a lot, right? As both Mr. Gromer and Jim pointed out, we're going to see a big jump in prices no matter what we do here, because we're changing these contracts at a time when the prices are high, and we're now dealing with a contract that was set with prices 3 years ago, and we're going to see a jump here. The problem is we don't know exactly how much, and it's hard to make the judgment. Right now, what the 100% green price is, 1.5% to 2% more. I'm sorry, 10 to 20% more than the per kilowatt hour than the standard price, something like that. If we figure that ratio is going to be the same, I don't know whether that would be true. This is a tough call, right? I'm not sure what to do. I mean, I'm kind of in favor of the 100% green, but not at an unlimited price. Dean.
Yeah, if I could just ask Mr. Gromer for a clarification. The slide that we've got in front of us right now talks about Mass Class 1 cost approximately $2.50 per month for each 10% for a typical resident. So does that imply that if you went 100% renewable, it would be $25 additional? But, $2.50 for each 10%?
So that's a good question. You would think so from the slide, but actually it wouldn't be quite so bad as that, because there's some amount of renewable electricity that's in the standard that's required by state law. And so to get to 100, all you need to do is buy the increment between what's the required amount and 100. To complicate it a little bit, there are a few different ways you can count what's in the state required amount. At a minimum, there's 20% in there, so you'd only have to buy 80% to get to 100. And this is, I think, another issue, is sort of like too complicated to try to add to the discussion now, I think, but one question for the town will be to decide how much extra do we need to get to 100%. And it's anywhere between, the baseline, depending on how you count it, is anywhere between 20 and say 50%. So you might need 80% to get to 100. You might only need 50% to get to 100. And so forgive me for making it even a little more complicated. The state required minimum increases every single year. So you're going to need less to get to 100 2 years from now than you need today, and even less than you might need 5 years from now. So that's another factor to take into account, is the timing of things.
Mr. Grumer, I have two questions. On the national power, what does that include, other than the fact that it comes from outside New England and the close provinces of Canada? That does include hydro. It includes power where the power companies have bought offsets, carbon offsets. Is that right? What other things does it include?
Yeah. So what the great majority of what that is wind. So it's the big wind farms in Texas and in the middle of the country, are the primary sources there. And that there are a few differences between buying that and buying the Class 1, which is also primarily wind in New England. The differences are that the incremental cost for that for that green part of that electricity, which is something called a REC that indicates the greenness of electricity, is very small. So making those payments to those generators in Texas doesn't really make so much difference for them. It's a little bit extra, but it doesn't make a difference in whether those projects get built or not. The financial equation is entirely different in New England, where the price of the RECs is essential to, it's a huge part of the revenue stream for the projects and critical to whether the projects get built or not.
So I have to say, for me, you know, I think, Jim, what you've proposed, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, there would be no upgrade. There is no better than 100% green class 1. So if you made that the standard, there's no upgrade from that, right? I don't mean you. I mean if we made the standard, but I think, you know, frankly, as far as, you know, I understand trying to push the local suppliers and things, but also to get you know, off of fossil fuels and reduce carbon to the atmosphere. The national power does that. I'd like to see us keep the 100% green that we have right now as the upgrade, and some mix of class 1 and national as the standard, but in other words, 100% renewable, either class 1 or standard, and then the basics selected by price. Am I making myself clear? So right now, I think the standard is, I know it's a 10% upgrade, but I'm just going to talk in absolute terms. It's 30% class 1 power and 70% anything, right? So what I'm thinking of, maybe we go to 40% class 1 power and 60% national for 100% renewable, but at a lower cost increment for people at this time of increasing costs, and leave the upgrade where it is, and then choose something for basic. Dean.
Yeah, I think, David, you've suggested a really good compromise, and I support your point of view on that.
Imogen.
So just to be clear, the ratio of what we decide for Mass Class A versus national, how long would that, like, is that something that we would have to carry through? Is that something that could change by year, or what's the flexibility?
It's the length of the contract. That's a good question. So our last contract, I believe, was 3 years. Mr. Gromer, is longer or shorter contracts an advantage or disadvantage to us?
So that's a good question, and this is a particularly tricky time for that. So if we look at electricity prices today, and those wholesale prices I was looking at a minute ago, they're the highest for the next year, and then they're lower the year after that, and then lower the year after that. So one strategy might be to have a multi-year contract, say just for example of a 3-year contract, then you get an average price over the 3 years, and you don't have quite as much price shock for the residents right off the bat. So that would be a good way to try to save people from a big increase now. The downside to that strategy, though, is that if prices fall, and if they fall more than expected, then you've locked in at kind of at a high time. So we'll see when we get the more refined pricing that we'll get over the next couple of weeks, but this may be a time when you not want to be thinking about 3 years, but maybe thinking about 2 years as a sort of a compromise for the length of the contract. The renewable default amounts are whatever you set in the contract. Typically, they're constant for the length of the term of the contract, and that's the way your contracts have worked up until now. So you're in a 3-year contract now, it's been 10% all 3 years. It is possible, if you want, to have the renewable amount increase over the course of the contract. So Natick does that, for example. So they have, I think it's a 2-year contract, but they had 15, I've forgotten the exact numbers, but 15% renewables in the first year of it and 20% renewables in the second year of it. So the renewable amount sort of increased over time. So that's another thing you can think about. So the number will be whatever you decide in the contract, but you can decide in the contract that it's a number that changes over time.
Other comments? I was not going to take, we're not making a decision tonight, so I was not going to take comments from the public tonight. I think I'm going to stick with that. We're just getting information and getting ourselves prepared for our meeting in 3 weeks. Other comments? Jim?
Just a comment on the National Wind Regs. So these are sort of regulatory leftovers. That is, that the regulations require that there be payments for these renewable energy certificates, and there's a market mechanism to set the price. And the price is now in most places in National Wind is at its regulatory minimum, because you don't. There is so much money to be made putting up turbines in the Midwest. Think of nice flat places where the wind can travel a long distance and it hits your wires and you print money. It's an awesome deal. People are doing it without the need for any extra incentive, especially these tiny little rec payments. So I would argue that they have no particular environmental value in encouraging more wind development. I would go as far. I think one of the reasons so few towns have taken this up is because it's subject to the charge of greenwashing. It's like, oh, well, you have this sort of fake 100% because you're filling it up with these junk recs that don't really create any new renewable energy. So I think that's why I would shy away from having that. Plus the complexity of explaining to people, well, there's this kind of 100% that we're going to have by default, and then there's this other kind of 100% that we would encourage you to upgrade to, and that's a very complicated explanation. So I would prefer to leave them out, but that's just my thought. Thanks.
That would be fine. And then, if we wanted to do something in the middle again, we could just raise the renewable portion by some amount, and Lexington was used as an example of a town that went to 100% using the national. But if we decide not to do that, that's also fine with me. We can come up with something in the middle. Dean.
Well, regardless of where the electricity is generated from wind, whether it's in New England or whether it's in the Midwest or Texas, electricity generated by wind is certainly more environmentally preferable, in my opinion, than electricity generated from coal or natural gas. So it's a question, I guess, of what level of purity do you want to go for? And I think we have to balance that environmental purity with also some economic issues for everyone here in town, including the people that don't qualify for these subsidized rates. Again, part of my remit is to look out for the well-being of the senior citizens, and I really think it's important that we keep that in mind and encourage people to make informed decisions, but don't suddenly stick somebody into a really high-priced option that they don't know about until after it happens.
For me, I don't mind. I guess I don't mind the national power. I don't have a strong opinion either way, but I don't mind someone, even if they've done it for, other reasons, that they can, generate electricity with wind cheaper than any fossil fuel plant. So you're going to do it anyway. I don't mind them making a little bit more profit because it makes, these projects. It does encourage projects elsewhere. So that doesn't bother me so much. But I understand, Jim, your point, and so for me, we can do either. But I think we have to be a little careful of the price, since people are going to be hit with a price increase anyway. Other comments? So, John or Mr. Gromer, do you need anything else from us tonight?
I do not.
No, I think this has been helpful to hear some initial discussion of the board as we prepare for the indicative pricing and the next steps, and we'll be in touch with the board along the way and get some information before your next discussion on the topic.
Yeah, and I think it'll become easier and more concrete to decide with a little bit more, knowing a little bit more about the actual pricing. Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate your presentation, Mr. Gold.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, item 6, discuss request for utility infrastructure on Pory Road. John, do you want to summarize the?
Sure, thank you. So, family on Pory Road has requested assistance from the town in connecting their property to the electrical grid. We were just talking a lot about electricity. Their property is at the end of Pory Road, and if you're familiar with that, that's where Narrow Park is. And currently the power lines stop right on Pory Road, kind of where the concert venue is, where the amphitheater is. And so there's no power going anywhere past that. This is something that we've looked at in the past. It was actually an item in the ARPA needs assessment that was identified at a cost of $75,000 at that point. And the idea was that we could connect the rest of Pory Road, which would give us some more flexibility and functionality in terms of power needs for Nara in the future, and also help out residents at the end of this road that need the assistance. The request, and I think Ms. Norton is here tonight to speak to her specific request, but just to give you a little more background of the work that we've done related to this is we did talk to Eversource. We believe it's going to cost to run phase 1 power is what I think we're talking about here. It would be in the range of $50,000 to get it at the end of the public right of way, and then it would be even more for the family to have the connection go on their private driveway to the public right of way. If we wanted to look at a larger power capacity for potentially, if we want to do some solar things out that way, we'd have to use different power, which would be more costly to run up that way, in the range of hundreds of thousands. So those are some of the things that we've been looking at in terms of what it would cost. And I just wanted to mention that to you, and I'll be here to answer any questions after we hear from Ms. Norton, who I believe is in the queue. Yes, Jamie Norton is there.
Yes, could you allow her to speak, please?
Yes. Go ahead, Jamie.
Hi, I want to thank the select board for adding us to the meeting tonight. I know you've heard from several of our neighbors and friends who support the project. I don't want to take a lot of your time because I know you kind of are aware of the issues. I could answer any specific questions, anything you want to know specifically about our systems, but I wanted to mention my family is suffering right now, and our quality of life is poor. Bringing electricity to the end of the road would be a life changer for us, and it would benefit the town. I know they've talked about wanting power at the end of the road where the DPW yard is. There's a lot of activity now. Certainly the Miracle League was put in, and there's several houses on the road since we built. The fireworks are set off at the DPW site. I think having power there would also make it safer for everyone. It's a narrow, dark road as it is. So I think, as John mentioned, other activities possibly for the future. I know the dog park was mentioned. Maybe that land would be used for something else. and spending the money now would be would save the town money from doing this in the future. And I think it would benefit the town, and it would help my family greatly. Thank you.
Thank you. So just so members know, in addition, so we can provide power on public streets and things like that. We can't hook up a specific house, but we can provide power on public streets where we would want to do that. Also useful here if utilities go out there is, and John, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the new rec buildings that are at the end of Narrow Park could use better internet access. That would come out with the utilities if we put, ran utilities to the end of the street. So that would also be useful for the town. I'll let John comment, and then Fran, I'll take your comment.
Yeah, just for the electrical engineers in the audience, I mentioned phase 1 power. It's phase 2 power, and it would be phase 3 if we were trying to build capacity to do some solar out there. But just wanted to make that correction.
Thank you. Fran.
So are we talking about getting electricity just, on the town road, or, and not getting electricity to their personal property? Is that what is that?
Right. We couldn't pick and choose to hook up some people in town and
right, right.
But we can provide the infrastructure on the public road so that it's the same as if anybody hooked up a new house, the pole's outside, you run the wires from the pole to your house.
I unfortunately have not driven by or down there at all to see the layout, but I was just curious. Yeah.
Dean.
So, I'm very sympathetic to the Norton's plight. However, I've got a few questions. I'm not aware of any precedent in the past where the town has paid to install utility poles on a public road. Usually that's something that's done by the electrical company. So I'm wondering if, in the first instance, whether this is going to create some sort of a precedent, and we have a situation where a developer comes in and builds a subdivision somewhere else in town and said, now the town has to come in and provide the utility infrastructure to service all these houses that I've built, because you did this in one particular instance on Pory Road, where the Nortons live. There's a second summer house, and I believe there's a third full-time residence in back there. Plus, I'm not sure what the development potential is of their entire parcel back there once you open it up. So I think I'd like to know from the town manager if he's aware of any precedents where the town of Acton has paid for this kind of utility infrastructure on a public road. I'm certainly not aware of it. Second point is, whether this extension of power within just the public right-of-way is something that's really needed for any of the town facilities. I'm not aware, and I've probably got more experience with DPW yard than everybody else here. I'm not aware of there ever being any need for any kind of electrical power back there. There's been some suggestion, well, gee, now we could run a utility line the length of the town forest road all the way to Nagog Park to illuminate that area now for special events. Now, that particular parcel of land is under the control of the Conservation Commission. I just sat through a rather lengthy meeting that they had about somebody putting in a couple of 4x4 posts for geocaching, and the Conservation Commission would not allow that. I'm also not sure if providing overhead lighting and a power line through a town forest or conservation area is really in keeping with what we think of as conservation land. However convenient that might be in some situations, I'd like to know if this has been discussed at all with the Conservation Commission. As far as the rest of the recreational infrastructure that exists presently, the sports pavilion and Miracle Field, I haven't heard any requests for providing any of that in the past. I know that there's already underground electric service that goes to services the sports pavilion. So if the only benefit to the town is that it might provide enhanced internet access to the sports pavilion, I wonder if our IT department can't come up with some better solution rather than spending $50,000 and providing electricity, and oh, by the way, we'll provide some internet service as well. So I'm just not sure that this is a route that the town should follow, as sympathetic as I am with the very real situation that the Nortons have found themselves in.
Imogen.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, want to thank everyone who sent in emails to us about the Norton family situation. We all read it. I read it, and it definitely it meant a lot to see the community come together to support. And for me, my stance is pretty clear. I think that power, access to electricity, is a human right. It's as simple as that. So if there's anything we can do to make that happen, we should be doing it. And so I would be interested in seeing if there's any way that we as a select board can take a decision today to try to expand access to electricity specifically on this road, so that we can get the Norton family the electricity that they need for their basic rights.
Other comments? Jim.
So I think Dean asked some really interesting and important questions, and I'm trying to think about, who's been paying for, utility poles on right-of-ways on public roads. I think we'd have to look back, even before Dean was here, but not before his grandparents were here. I mean, there was this electrification period where we somehow put up all these poles. I don't think individual homeowners paid for those. They paid for their own individual hookups. I think it is a reasonable standard that on our public roads that we have utility poles. Thinking about all the public roads in Acton, I think that is true in 99% of the cases. This is this odd case where, the Nortons for a while were in a situation where they were able to maintain an off-grid house. It required a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of skill, and that's just a situation that's not there anymore. I think it's time for them to, join the rest of, electrified civilization, and that's what they want. And I think it's a reasonable standard that we figured out how to extend the pole system to the end of their driveway. I agree that we don't want to get into the habit of saying, oh, there's a development, there's a private way, we're going to start, sending telephone poles down there. We don't do that. In fact, our our subdivision laws require the developers to pay for that, and in fact to bury it. So it's I don't think it's going to create a precedent for other developments and other developers. If we say it's a public road, we'll make sure there's utility poles there because that's the way it is everywhere else. And I guess my question for the manager would be, if we do decide to move in that direction, what source of funds might he recommend for paying for this?
Can I address that a little bit? Right, I think there are, and I was just about to do that. I think there are several possibilities. One is we could use ARPA funds. I wouldn't want to do that. For me, I wouldn't want to do that today because I think that that's important to when we come back to ARPA, probably this summer, that we look at all the things that we might spend ARPA money on at that time together. Because if we look at them one at a time, they get implicitly prioritized in the order that we look at them. second source of funds, which would normally be there, but is not available this year, or maybe there's even two of them, is basically town meeting funding of one of two forms, right? One is, we could add to the capital budget, but in the agreement we just came to at ALG, we're already cutting $130,000 from our capital budget. We would have to cut $50,000 more in order to add this $50,000 back. We might have a little bit extra in free cash, but also to balance the budget, we just took down free cash to near the floor guidelines that our finance committee recommends. There may be also other sources of funding that are not, that need to be explored. So what I would propose is that we postpone a decision on this for a few months until we have some time to explore other sources of funding. This issue really just came up roughly a month ago, maybe even not quite a month ago, and at least it was made public to all of us. And there hasn't been time to explore other things, and then that we come back to this summer and maybe with a recommendation there, or at that time consider using ARPA funds to do this, along with other things that we would consider this summer. That would be my recommendation. I don't know if there are any comments on that, Dean.
Yeah, I think that's a good solution. I mean, I know it's a pressing problem for the Nortons, but it's been a problem for quite some time. The infrastructure has never been there. I think there's so many issues out there, legal and financial. I really think it is important that we take some time to think about this. And even the questions that the town manager has raised, if we're going to pay for the infrastructure, are we going to pay for two-phase, or are we going to pay for three-phase infrastructure and eventually try to cover the soccer field out there with solar panels? I don't know. But I think there's enough uncertainties here, and this is really sort of a cutting-edge sort of thing that to answer Jim's question about when power got brought into the town. Town used to buy power from the American Woolen Mill in Maynard. And to the best of my understanding, that was never paid for by the town. I mean, it was an extremely small town, but that infrastructure was actually paid by the company that was providing the power. And that's the situation that has always occurred along all the public roads in town, is that the infrastructure gets paid for by a combination of the electric company and the telephone company. They split the costs of these things. It's never been a situation, to my recollection, and my father's not around, so I can't ask him the question, but I know that the stories I heard about when Charter Road got electrified back in the 30s, that was the situation, is that it was provided by the power company. Eventually, American Woolen Mill went out of business, and it ended up getting bought out. The power supply issue was bought out by Boston Edison. But it's always been a private sector situation of providing the infrastructure. And it was always, the power companies always figured that there was a financial incentive for them to make that investment, because they knew that eventually there'd be enough houses there to tie in. Now, if we knew what the development potential was of the Norton's property, and we could discuss that with Eversource, maybe they'd be more motivated to pay for that infrastructure, as indeed they did for the most of the rest of the length of Pory Road. I remember when that was first electrified, probably 35 years ago. That was not done by the town. That was done by Eversource, because they knew that there was a potential to make some money on it. But I do favor David's idea that gives us a little more time so that we can kind of tease out all of these various issues.
for me, I would like to figure out some way to do this, so that we can get the project going during this summer, and then so by the next heating season, it can be in place at their house, to be able to have this, done in time. But, I think we've gotten to the, I don't know how we would entice the power company to do this. We can't promise them development rights on someone's property. So, Imogen.
Yeah, I think that the finances are the key question here. But I think that this should be, something we move on sooner rather than later. I don't know the updates from ALG. That's going to be later on in our agenda. So in terms of putting this on a town meeting, I don't know what the constraints of that would look like, but if there's any way we could move sooner rather than later, I think it would be good. And, in terms of using ARPA funds, we've heard a lot of feedback from people on where that should be best used. And I definitely think that there should be some strategy, but I think also, that is a source of funding. And like you said, David, if, we do decide we need to use that, then we decide we need to use that. So just a quick question from the town manager. With your discussions with Eversource, was there any talk about potential discounts, or was that the flat rate they gave you of $75K?
Well, we've been talking with them for a few years about this. The pricing information we have is from late 2019, and it could be different. It was closer to 50,000. I think we were saying 50 to 75 just because we don't know. But in terms of our conversations with them, it's been that they didn't have an interest in doing it on their own, as was discussed earlier. We didn't push or have any leverage to push on that, but certainly something that could be explored.
So, Imogen, in response to your finance questions, if we were to bring it to town meeting, you have to identify something we would not fund. Right. You need to find, someone, I'm sure if we told the town manager to cut $50,000 more out of the capital budget, he would do that. But I'm not sure I would vote for that. I mean, other members of the board might all vote for that, but I'm not sure that I would vote for that, because we're already cutting, in order to get the budget balance, we're already cutting our capital budget. And so, basically we're at the limit of what we can tax. So there isn't any more money. We have to take, money for one thing has to come from another thing. I think it's worth, I would like to, even if we, agree to town meeting or something, which is in May, right? If there was money, it'll take a while to do the project, right? To run the poles, run the wires to their house, whatever. The town would have to do its contract. They would have to do their contract. I think we need to do a little bit more exploration into sources of funding, and come back at the time we do the ARPA funds, either with another solution or throw the ARPA funds into the mix as to what we might fund, and make the decision at that time. Unless someone has another concrete suggestion, I don't see Jim.
Well, I'd be curious about the use of the Energy Efficiency Fund, whether it has any money left in it. We recently allocated money from there for the AHA, and I didn't know if there was extra money in there.
There's money in there. I don't know how you would define extra. We certainly have a large agenda for climate action plan and goals that we're going to try to fund, and that was one source we were looking at.
Yeah. And the other thought was just on a side issue, but when we do finally get back to the wonderful days of having the July 4th there, my experience in the past has been that there's been a whole series of generators placed along the path there that are really loud and noisy. And the thought of being able for one night to string out a bunch of LEDs for a night of getting people in and out on that road is very attractive. It'd be quiet, more peaceful, and wouldn't require any permanent installation. Or it's pretty easy to string a bunch of lightweight lights along the path. That's my final point.
So are we agreed to push this decision off till at a later time, sometime this summer maybe? I see one thumbs up.
Yeah, as long as it's accompanied by, I think we need to make some instruction to the town manager about figuring out how to do this, and then with the notion of being able to make a decision later on.
Yeah, I'll work with the town manager on looking for other funding, and then we'll probably come back for an ARPA discussion during the summer. So that would be at least the plan. So, Fran, did you have a question?
And can we push it up sooner during the summer for discussion? If we hit maybe we're coming up on town meeting, maybe a late March meeting.
I wouldn't want to do that. Again, it's a vote, so everybody gets to vote. But I think that to do it the ARPA discussion before town meeting is not the right order. And I think it's important that we look at all the other potential uses of ARPA funds at the same time, right? And I think we may not be prepared until then, right? This is a long-standing situation. This is not a situation where the Nortons lost their electricity in the last 2 weeks and then we have to restore it, right? This has been the situation forever, right? And if we take a couple more months here to try to figure it out, I mean, if we had a huge free cash balance, in some years where we have a big free cash balance, spending $50,000 of free cash is not a big deal, but this year it is a big deal, right? And so, that's what I'm going to move forward with, unless someone wants to make a specific, alternate plan here, right? Imogen.
I think that as a tentative plan, I think that makes sense, especially because I think that, ultimately we do have to fund this. But that said, thank you for offering to speak with the town manager to try to find sources of funding for this. And, the fact that that's going to be an ongoing discussion and an ongoing look would be helpful, at least to ensure that, we are taking our due diligence with this time to make sure that we are sustainably, but also, actively trying to pursue funding for this project.
Jim.
As a final thought, it's possible this is all going on, and luckily there's privacy involved here. But I would want to make sure that whether it was you, David, or you, John, that reached back out to the Nortons, that they know that in addition to the financial thing that we can potentially help them with, we do have a human services department that might be able to help with the the logistical, the emotional, the financial distresses of being in the situation that they're in. And this may all be happening, and I don't know, but I would just want to make sure that they know from our point of view that, we want to be helpful in the ways that we can as soon as we can.
Okay, we'll leave it there. I'm not going to take comment on this tonight because we're not actually making the decision tonight. And it's also getting late, and we're only halfway through the agenda. The next item on the agenda is to discuss the return to in-person meetings. This is pretty straightforward. First our meeting and then all the other meetings. John, did you have any?
Just that in early January, the board made a motion and voted that it recommend that all boards and committees strongly consider meeting virtually through the end of February, which is today is the end of February. So it'd be helpful if there's I assume you don't want to renew that suggestion, but it'd be helpful to have that recorded in some fashion tonight. And if there's any further direction on how you want other boards and committees to consider, having their meetings. We do through this state. We still are allowed through July as of right now to meet virtually. It's been extended to July and not further as far as I know. So there is still a potential for folks to meet virtually if they'd like to. I just think it'd be helpful to have some, first of all, direction on this board on how you want to meet, starting as soon as next week. And also if you want to provide any guidance to the rest of the boards and committees.
Comments? Dean.
Well, I would recommend that the select board begin meeting in person and still provide hybrid access for the public. And I'd suggest we do that immediately. I'd further recommend that we encourage all of the town boards and committees to begin meeting in person when it's practical and when they're comfortable with it. And I know that, again, being able to provide hybrid access would certainly be a favorable point. I know that we've been using a lot of money that we got from the federal government to support the IT infrastructure and to be able to do these hybrid meetings. So hopefully will not create any huge financial burdens. But I think that from a point of view of just the process by which decisions are made, I think it's much easier to make those decisions when you're in a face-to-face meeting. And I think it's time for us to open back up again.
Well, I'm certainly in favor of us returning to in-person meetings and allowing other boards and committees to meet in person. John, are there any restrictions from an IT point of view on allowing committees to meet in a hybrid fashion? Right, there was some limitation, or we were taking them on a case-by-case basis for a while because there was concern that we might not be able to support all of them as they needed.
We can do our best to accommodate that. Again, it is easier for staff to have it either be all in person or all virtual. Oftentimes it requires staff support for boards and committees that don't have staff or IT. We have 2 or 3 staff at this meeting that wouldn't normally be here if this was an in-person meeting. So if we do that for all of our 40 plus committees, it doesn't necessarily cost more money, but it creates more work for staff and it changes priorities. So I don't have any specific request or guidance other than that folks be patient with wanting to do hybrid and work with our team. They have to schedule the meeting locations, and in doing that, make sure that they're also in touch with the manager's office if there's also an interest in doing hybrid at the same time.
Himajin.
Yeah, I think that as a recommendation, so for us, I think that going back in person, making masks recommended would be good, whether that's just like within us or if that's something we can actually do. But I do know that the Board of Health did remove the mask mandate. I think the other thing also is instead of saying or instead of encouraging like one way or another, I think that maybe the best thing to do for our boards and committees is to say that, you know, feel like to provide the option of, you know, if they want to be in person, they can be in person, mask recommended, or they can be online, and just providing that dual option or hybrid without taking necessarily a stance on it might be helpful, because I know for some of my boards and committees, some of them prefer to meet online, but some of them prefer to meet in person, socially distanced. And so I think it really just kind of depends on who the members are, kind of what the committee vibe is. So I think that just kind of providing that option would be good.
Jim, did you have a comment?
I'm fine with our meeting in person. Depending on my circumstances at home, I might choose to wear a mask while I'm in these meetings. But I think that's an individual choice for everyone. In terms of the hybrid, I think, you know, I share that concern about, you know, overloading the staff. So I guess as a priority, I would be for the meetings that have had a lot of public participation, like ours, to have the ability to meet in person as a meeting, but have public participation available via Zoom. I think that would be I would hate to lose that for the boards that have, you know, a lot of public participation.
So I'm hearing that this group should return to in-person meetings, or allow other boards and committees to return to in-person meetings if they want. If they want to work in a hybrid fashion, please coordinate with the town manager's office. I see everybody nodding. John, does that sound good to you, or do you need a vote from us, or is that good?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Thanks.
If we're communicating with all boards and committees, it might also be good to remind them that, as far as we know, July 1st is the end of the ability to generally meet virtually, except in, you know, special exceptions that we've had before.
Yeah, I think the way the current laws are is that as of July 1st, all members have to be in the same place. The chair has to be local, and you know, if you want to have one person be virtually, they have to be 20 miles away or whatever the standard was. So, but the legislature has been changing the rules a month before they expire, so we won't know until June what they're going to do.
I'm having a deja vu.
Yes. Okay, item 8, discuss format and logistics for annual town meeting. John, please.
Thank you. So we're scheduled to have our annual town meeting May 16th, and we're hoping to decide the final layout and logistics for how we were to hold it. The last 2 or 3 meetings that we've held were inside outside, which were fun in some ways, but they also were logistically challenging and expensive. And so if the board is comfortable, I hope that we can meet in the auditorium as we had previously at the high school for the May 16th meeting. I just wanted to make sure that there was a little comfort with that plan before we start preparing for it.
And it's true, if there was a let's not think too much about this, but if the pandemic resurged again, we could scramble at the last minute to do something.
We certainly could,
okay,
if necessary. And you know, we normally would set up the meeting in the auditorium with the overflow in the gym, and we would do that in this case, I believe. And then if we need to make further pivots as we get closer, we can do that. But I think it'd be good to have the primary plan be the original plan, or the original setup.
Thank you. Comments, Jim?
Would the setup be distanced in some way? I don't know, every other row, or people apart at a certain distance, or are we expecting that by May we'll have enough people that are comfortable sitting close to each other?
We could look through that, talk to the Board of Health about that, and you know, rely on people to make decisions that day on where they want to sit. Also,
Imogen.
So I do like the idea of using the gym and the auditorium. As opposed to thinking of the gym as an overflow room, maybe we can kind of more evenly distribute people between the two. And so, as Jim was saying, try to minimize the density of people in one place, per what Board of Health recommends, and contingent on the COVID situation. I was wondering, though, what the cost is, like how much more expensive is it to have like an outdoor indoor version, versus just having everything inside?
Yeah, there are costs that we need to incur. We have a whole AV team. If you're in the gym and you look over to the right, there's a whole team of people in addition to our staff that we brought in to mix the audio so that it sounds right from the gym to the outside to the big huge telescreen. And those are thousands of dollars worth of resources that are needed. The Jumbotron, I don't want to say how much that costs, but it's expensive. And those are several things that we wouldn't need to do if we were doing it the way we used to. So it's more than $10,000 different. Mark, would you be able to?
Yeah, John, I think you're right, and I'd say it's about $20,000 increment there to do the in-out style. Standard town meeting is probably about 15. So, the in-out hybrid was probably 35,000 to do last year.
Thank you.
Thanks. And just a quick note, if there are ways that we can save on the money that we use for town meeting, that's potentially another source of revenue that we could use to help with Pory Road. So just putting that out there.
Yeah, I believe the high school auditorium seats, 990 or 1,000 people. Typical for most town meetings, we probably have more like 500 or 600 attendees. So yeah, when people tend to cluster because they see their friends and they want to chat. So that's a decision they have to make for themselves, how close they want to be their friends and acquaintances during the meetings. And then I think if we do open either the gym or the cafeteria as an overflow space and encourage people to spread out, I think that would pretty well handle it. I think people could be fairly well distanced. I'd like to think that everybody likes to come to town meeting, but apparently that's not the case.
Other comments? Yeah, Fran, did you want to say something?
I have nothing helpful to add, but I do love the outdoor town meeting. And it has nothing in the summer, it's awesome.
As long as it's not raining or, something like that. Actually, I'd like to move back to the indoor format, and I suspect that the direction we're going, it's just not going to be a problem. And if it is a problem, we'll scramble at the last minute, I think it's okay. But that's what I'm hearing from most folks here, right? We all seem to be okay within the auditorium with overflow in the gym. Okay. Thank you. And so, John, you have what you need.
Thank you.
The update on requests for more resources for renters. John.
Thank you for putting this back on the agenda. I just wanted to take a minute or two to provide an update to the board. This was the topic of discussion at several meetings at the beginning of the year, and after the January meeting, the board asked me to do a couple of things to help provide some support to folks that live in apartments in the community, and I just wanted to share some of the things that we did. We stood up a website with a comprehensive resource for information that people may want to know if they're a renter or if they have an issue with their landlord or if they have health code issues they want to describe, and that's been publicized. We trained our town services hotline staff to handle tenant queries and actually have been directing them to how to handle them and get them to information quickly. We have a staff working group of social services and other professionals within the organization that when an issue has come up, we will convene them to help address the issue. A dedicated email address, tenant support at actonma.gov, has been set up. We've, since this was publicized on January 28th, which was a month ago, we have received 3 or 4 calls and emails. We've helped a few people that were looking for assistance. They actually got coverage in the Boston Globe, which was nice to see Acton being recognized for some of the things that we're doing. And we're going to continue to try to find ways to publicize this, to engage with different people that own property in town that have a lot of renters in them. We have been looking at lists that we collect and ways to use that to share not just information about this, but all the things that we're trying to publicize. We put out a lot of information, and we're always looking for new ways to get it out there. And we see that the property owners that own these apartment buildings as a really good way to try to get to more people. So that was it. I just wanted to make sure that the board saw that. And if there's any further questions on that, please let me know.
Questions from members of the board or comments? Jim.
Sure. Just to kind of re-raise some of these questions that came up from Kirsten at the residents' concern section. It seems like you're already tracking the calls, which is great. So you were able to say how many calls you've gotten and how that's gone. That's really helpful. If you're gathering, I remember gathering information about, who lived in apartments just by looking at the town census. So it seems like there's an opportunity potentially to get the word out to residents via a mailing. Obviously the municipal monthly is not the way to go, because that's only going to get to people that are paying property bills, they're property owners, or they're people that have already given their email address to the town and signed up for announcements. So I'm wondering if there's room in this process and where for a mailing. That also deals with the issue that we got raised earlier about, how residents have really been getting the word directly about, some of the PFAS information, which actually confuses me because I thought the water district actually mailed to individual households. So that's a little confusing to me. And then I wondered also about whether the renters, the staff group would be interested in having some volunteer informants who are, actual Acton apartment dwellers to help with, understanding, issues from apartment dwellers and, getting ideas and feedback. That would be, I guess, my main questions.
Sure, I'll take them in reverse order and do my best to get back through them. In terms of resident input, if there's people that have suggestions or ideas or want to provide input, that tenant support email address is a great way to provide it. The working group is really more of a response team to help with a specific issue, and a lot of times involves personal information that I'm not really comfortable bringing in volunteers unrelated to the cases to work on. So I don't really see a role there, but if there are things that people or advocates in the community think are important for us to be noticing or working on, please share them with that address, and we'd love the input. A postcard or mailing, I think, we do our best to try to communicate with people. I think some people may say a postcard will never get seen, and you have just as good a chance of putting a Facebook post and getting seen than a postcard. We try as many things as we can, and we hope that if there's someone that's looking for information and they Google renter Acton, they'll find us. If they need help, we try to put as much information out there as possible. And a postcard is certainly an idea. I don't know that that's going to be the solution to connecting with the people that we need to, we'll certainly consider it. What was the other one? Did I cover them all?
Yeah, and it's just a confirmation that the renter support group or you or someone is keeping track of the number of calls that come in and the results.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions or comments? Okay. Oh, Imogen.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi is really bad, so I might cut out. But very quickly before I do, in terms of next steps, sorry, I missed that part. Can you elaborate more on what that looks like?
Our next steps are going to continue to provide resources to folks that need them and be available to assist with anyone that needs assistance.
And specifically about the working group, any updates on like what that will look like?
Yeah, it's not a group that meets together weekly to talk about things. It's a group that's convened when an issue arises to help address the issue. So it's really on a case by case. It's a casework. We're treating it almost like a casework scenario, and we have a team approach to the casework because there's a lot of folks within the organization that have subject matter expertise in different disciplines that this individual or family is dealing with. So we bring them all together to help address the concerns that arise.
Got you. Thanks. That's really helpful.
Jim.
I was looking over the letter of the person's notes again. Has it become clear as you've been talking about this, are there issues that are clearly outside the scope of what the town can handle currently?
Yes, we've had a few people asking for legal advice or legal advice. Really, I mean, we're not attorneys, and I don't think we can afford to provide that service. We do connect people to Metro West Legal Services, and there's another organization that we connect people to, and we can provide general kind of, here are the resources about tenant laws, but we can't be getting in between disputes between two private parties in most cases, anyways.
So if people, for example, had feedback about the fact that Metro West Legal Services maybe isn't calling them back, or that the South Middlesex Opportunity Council seems to be overwhelmed and is not getting back to people, that's the kind of feedback you'd like to have, right? Because that would be like, here's we're sending these people to these services and it's not working. If that's true, it sounds like you'd want to know about that.
Yes, we would.
Great, thanks.
Anything else? Okay, well, we'll move on to item 10, the prioritization of the Asa Parlin House with regard to the CPC requested funding this year. Fran, you asked to have this put back on the agenda. I'll let you go first here.
I don't know how much time I can take. I'm reading from the project report that was done in 2012, and I don't want to take up a lot of time. I think that I know there's a lot of controversy about money being spent, CPC funds. I know we lowered the amount of the requests this year, and I think doing the phase one, just stabilization of the building, is really important. And I'd like to see this moved up in the prioritization category, only because it's been in the works for so long. I mean, this report was done in 2012, and basically this group of folks, architects, just to read their recommendations, were just to retain the core of the original house, remove later the 20th century additions, reinforce structural members, repair the roof and cladding, and keep the building painted. And that's basically what needs to be done now just to preserve the building. And I think that would be a great first step. And the house is made of wood, so I think it makes it a little bit more of a priority than maybe other projects that are in the category of a high priority category. Sorry. Do you have any questions?
So, I think this is we reduced, in the town manager's presentation to the CPC, reduced the request that from what it was originally, basically just to the kind of the things that you spoke about, Fran, just to stabilize the building. I think that's important. I've said in a lot of different contexts, whether it's the Morrison farmhouse or this house, I don't want to see things just fall in on themselves, right? And I think this is a good use of CPC funds. So depending on what members think here, we can get a sense and see if we want to raise the priority. But I'll let other people share their thoughts first. Himija.
This is a question for both Fran and maybe Dean as well. But if we do move up the prioritization, and I'm also in favor of stabilizing it. So if we do move that up, would that change CPC's approach to this? Do you think it would sway their decision? What decisions have been made? I guess maybe I'm just not familiar with where CPC is at this point. So would like to get some clarification on that.
Dean, do you want to address that?
Sure. So I think one of the, obviously, I've harped on this repeatedly, is that we don't have enough money to fund all the projects anyway. So anything that looks like it's got some uncertainty or some controversy, those are good things for the CPC not to get involved with. The problem with the Asa Parlin House is that there doesn't seem to have been a consistent focus on what's being asked for, and more importantly, what the long-term plan is for the building. At one point, there was discussion about the building being used basically as a meeting space because there was a lack of meeting spaces available for town boards and committees and other groups. That's been on the back burner for 2 years, but eventually folks are going to want to meet more in person, so there will be a need for more meeting room space. But then it starts getting wrapped up in things like, cultural center, and nobody can really define what a cultural center is, or at least they haven't expressed that to the CPC. Or, there's been discussion about it being used as an adjunct for the library. There's been discussion in the past about making it in some kind of maker space and filling it up with 3D printers. A banquet facility of some sort. All these things get rumored around, and they're frankly very confusing. CPC works best if they're given, choice A or choice B, approve or deny, and not getting involved in a lot of policy issues. So I think that's the biggest problem, or one of the problems the CPC is that we're not sure exactly what it is that we're being asked for, and these decisions tend to get changed depending upon the personality of the board and whatever. So that's a real issue. I think as far as guidance, we've heard all of the presentations, and CPC next week is going to start seriously prioritizing these things ourselves. Certainly whatever information the board wishes to send to the CPC would be accepted, but not necessarily anything's going to make a determination. I did this afternoon have a discussion with the town manager, about some issues about leftover money from a previous CPC application for the Ace of Parliament House, and whether that money can be reused or whether what's being envisioned now is in keeping with that original grant. So manager has offered to come in and try to clarify that a bit to CPC next week. So that'll probably be helpful. Certainly, I think the smaller project that you can come up with and the consistency of the vision, and certainly keep it consistent along the lines of what Fran was talking about let's just try to preserve the smallest piece of the building that might have some historical significance and move on. Make sure it's not going to collapse on us. And then I'm skeptical CPC is ever going to fully fund a conversion of that building into some grandiose cultural center or something like that. There's already been discussion amongst CPC that, you know, this is such a big project that maybe instead of going to CPC, this should be in the town's capital plan, and it should be voted as a separate warrant article at town meeting. And obviously that's going to take a lot more outreach, and it's not anything that's going to happen this year. But I think, you know, the dollar value for this project has just got so high, it's really breaking the back of the CPC bank.
Yeah, I agree. One of the problems with project like this and CPC is the total size versus you know, the kind of the clarity of the final result. And I think the only way to do these things is to phase them, and I think that's what is being proposed here now, right? You know, I think most of us originally, or I guess it was the sentiment of maybe even all of us at the time, to make this a medium priority, mainly because it eclipsed all the other projects from the town, or could have eclipsed, right? Just this one project could have consumed almost all the money for the town. But now it's a smaller thing, and I think that there is not going to be the clarity on the final thing, because that's not what's being asked for in the final request to CPC. What's being asked for is money to stabilize the oldest part of the structure, and get rid of the rest. So and that may be a stepping stone to a cultural center, but we need to come back, you know, with the final plan for that. But you know, it's very difficult to me to say, you know, we need to know exactly where we're going when that's not the funding we're asking for right now. We were originally, but that got scaled back so that it would fit. So, I mean, I think it's very reasonable if that's what we're asking for, but I think that's not what's being asked for now. And I think it's important to you know, to move forward. I just don't like the, you know, if you walk around that building closely, you know, you can look at the inside. The inside is still in not bad shape, but it's not going to be in not bad shape for many years, because you look at the clapboards on that building and they're not in good shape, right? And so the interior of the building is going to go away soon, and I think, you know, we need to do something to stabilize it. And I see majority support in town for that, right? I think you know, there are a few people in town who would like just to tear down the building. I don't think the HDC would support that, but even so, I don't think that's the majority of the opinion. I do think that the opinion for what to do with the building longer term is a little bit split, right? But I do see definitely overall support for preserving the building, and a hope by a lot of people that it can be used for a cultural center. Himajin.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on you really quick. I think that exactly like you said, there is pretty much wide support from what I've seen with preserving it. And I think that, you know, especially given that it was one of the select board priorities at the beginning, and now with this reduced amount, I feel like if we had gone through our initial list of like prioritization with this reduced amount for Ace of Parliament at first, I feel like we would have had it ranked high. We'll find out now today in the vote, but I would be in favor of voting to put that to a higher extent, and then CPC ultimately would be making the decision, being informed by this, but ultimately there's not enough money to go around for all projects, and that's something we understand. So that would be left to CPC.
So would anybody else like to make any comments before we do the thumbs up, thumbs down thing in raising the priority to high? Seeing none? Thumbs up or thumbs down for raising the priority to high. So we in the end we're unanimous, and this is I'll just clarify that everybody can shake their head no or yell at me or something if that's not the case. So what we've just done is to prioritize as high the reduced project, which is the stabilization of the building. Okay, thank you everyone. The ALG financial model, John.
Thank you. I wanted to bring the board up to speed where we are since our last ALG meeting. We met 2 Fridays ago, and that was following the school district and its change to its budget. They reduced their budget to an assessment of 3.18, which was down from a larger number that contributed to a $1.7 million deficit. And so we discussed at that meeting some different strategies to balance the budget for FY23. Amongst those were an increase in the amount that we're allocating from free cash to $250,000. Some changes to revenue assumptions that we were comfortable with and our finance department was comfortable with related to new growth and local receipts, and also some changes to how we plan for allowances and abatements to help fund the tax relief programs that we provide for many residents. And with all those changes, there was still a need to reduce the town's spending to balance the budget. And so in order to do that, what we propose is reducing $133,000 from the capital plan. If you recall, the capital plan was presented to this board and the finance committee on November 15th. And at that point, it laid out what we were recommending for 23 and then the following 9 years after that. When we presented the actual town manager's recommended budget a week or 2 later, we had actually reduced the capital plan slightly to make the numbers work to get to a number that was in the low 3s. This reduction that we're discussing right now would bring our budget from 3.35 to 3.0, and it would require us to reduce the capital spending by $133,000. So that's something that I'm working with the team right now. It's not as easy as it sounds. I think we worked very hard to prioritize the capital plan, and a lot of things that we wanted to do we weren't able to do to begin with, and to reduce further what we're planning to do is going to be a challenge, but we're up to it, and we'll have it figured out by next week when we ask you to vote on it. So that's where we're at right now, and with all those changes, with what the school district changed and what we proposed, what we discussed changing here, that would bring our budget to a balanced budget to go to town meeting. And there appeared to be consensus from all 3 parties that participate in the ALG. I don't know if the finance committee met since then. I was away last week, but that's where we're at. If there's any questions as we prepare for your consideration of the budget and your formal vote next week, if there's any feedback or concerns about this, please let me know.
So just for clarity, we have to officially transmit the budget to the finance committee at least 2 months ahead of town meeting. So we will vote on that at our next meeting. I mean, obviously the finance committee's already seen it, but that's what we're required to do. Jim.
since this is a balancing with the regional schools, is there any word about Foxborough's ability / willingness to play its part? Because presumably they have budget adjustments to make too.
So they don't.
Oh.
So
Cool. Let's
so
go there.
Boxborough is not at the limits of Proposition 2.5, and so they have, and also their assessment is increasing at a little bit higher rate than ours because their enrollment is increasing a little bit higher rate than ours. Actually, ours is going down, and Boxborough is going up. So they don't have the same. I'm not saying that they don't have their own challenges, but they don't have the same kind of conversation as we have. For us at the ALG, it's a balancing act since we're in Boxborough's case, they still have the option of taxing more should their select board want to do that, right? So we're at the limits of 2.5. So we started off with an increase from the schools system of 4.36, if my memory is correct, which they reduced down to 3.18. This is Acton. These increases are from Acton's assessment, and in both of in that 4.36, the school district had already done some cutting. The town originally came in with 3.35% after having done the cuts that John just referred to. We're selecting in the capital budget what we would do, and then this is going from 3.35% down to 3.0%, and the 3.0% on the part of the town, 3.18 on the part of the school system, plus uses of E&D on the part of the schools, some free cash on our part, and changes to some revenue assumptions that John mentioned. That brings us to last I looked was $10,000 over. So. Questions, comments? So we should be voting next time on officially transmitting the budget. Charlie, I will take your comment. Justin, would you allow Charlie Cadleck to speak, please?
Yes. Here you go, Charlie.
Thank you, David. Thinking back toward my comment at the beginning of this meeting, I don't think I made myself quite clear. We are in a situation where one bad move by Mr. Putin would put us in a state of war with Russia. How do I know that? I didn't make it up. We are part of NATO. If Putin were to send troops to any of the small NATO countries and they invoked Article 5 of the NATO treaty, all NATO nations are in a state of war with Russia. If you think this is impossible, I've lived through some impossible situations which turn out to be real. I think we should spend some time discussing how this would impact the whole country and Acton specifically. I don't have the time to elaborate, but take this seriously. People are dying in I'm sorry. Well, in what country I'm thinking of, my brain just. This is serious. I don't usually bring this stuff up like this, but this is not a standard year. Things are happening in the world which will affect all of us. Potentially, any news is probably bad news. I can go on for a long time, but Please think about it. This is not just some speculation. It's happening right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We'll all have a chance to think about that and everything else, and then we'll be voting on this next week. Okay, and the last item is an Eagle Scout Court of Honor for 2 Eagle Scouts in Troop 1, I think, on March 19th. I will not be in town on March 19th, and I was wondering if there's a volunteer to attend that Court of Honor. Dean.
Well, it's my old troop, so I'll volunteer to go. I'd be happy to do it.
Okay, that would be great. If no objection, I assume, from anybody else?
Thank you, Dean.
Yes, thank you. For consent items, I will read the consent items and please say hold if you want me to hold. And please say it because with the list on my screen, you guys are partially obscured. So I see only, I don't see Jim at all. I see only half of him. So, okay. So item 13, approved meeting minutes, January 20th and February 7th, 2022. Item 14, approved executive session minutes, January 27th, 2022. Item 15, approve amendment of easement agreement, 300 Main Street. Item 16, approve land court petition for relocation of Hayward Road. Item 17, refund request, planning division totaling $4,300. Sorry?
Hold that one, please.
Okay, hold number 17, and I won't even read that the rest of it for now. Item 18, accept gift, Acton Nursing Service for $1,950 from Anonymous for balance of maintenance class and the senior center at the senior center. And item 19, accept gift recreation department for $3,000 from Enterprise Bank to support the 2022 summer concert series and events. Item 20, accept gift recreation department for $1,500 from Sutherland Realty Group and Keller Williams to support the 2022 summer concert series and events. 21, committee appointment, Dr. Ramachandran Balakrishna, full member, Transportation Advisory Committee, term to expire June 30th, 2025. And committee appointment, Melissa Morris, full member, Diversity, Equity, Inclusive Commission, term to expire June 30th, 2025. So I will take a motion to approve items 13 through 16 and 18 through 22 inclusive.
So moved.
So Jim moves and
Second.
And Dean seconds. Jim, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. On items 13 through 16 and 18 through 22, Imogen Nagareddy.
Aye.
Fran Arsenault.
Aye.
Dean Charter.
Aye.
Jim Snyder Grant says aye. And how about you, David?
I say aye as well. So
okay, that's unanimous.
The consent items are approved, and now we'll discuss item 17, refund request, planning division totaling $4,339.78 for Mr. Robert Johnson for costs associated with the withdrawal of a proposed definitive subdivision and special permit application without prejudice. Jim.
So I don't know, it's something to do with access rights or something, but I couldn't find any documentation on it. The town manager reported that it was there. I just couldn't see it, so I didn't have a chance to review. So I thought either we could delay this if that was possible until there was some documentation, or if the town manager wanted to explain more about, what development this was and, what's normal in this process. And I needed a little background before I was feeling okay about it.
Happy to bring this back next week if that works for everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take no action on item 17. And if nobody has anything else, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Oh, let's let Fran.
So can I take that as Fran moves and Jim seconds?
Absolutely.
Okay. Jim, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. On the notion of being able to turn off our computers and go home. Imogen Nagareti.
Aye.
Fran Arsenault.
Aye.
Dean Charter.
Aye.
David Martin.
Aye.
Jim Snyder Vance says aye. It's good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.